I sat on the cold kitchen floor, my red sweater stained with foundation that failed to hide the bruises on my wrists. Dad looked at the Christmas tree, then at me, saying only one sentence: "Do not ruin the holiday for everyone." He never asked if I was hurt, only how we would look to the neighbors. I expected to stay silent like always, until the door flew open and Aunt Elaine walked in, her eyes locking onto my injuries. My name is Lila Monroe, and the first thing I saw on Christmas morning was not snow or a stocking, but the ugly bloom of purple and yellow spreading across my rib cage in the bathroom mirror. The harsh fluorescent light of my parents' downstairs powder room was unforgiving. It hummed with a low, electric buzz that seemed to vibrate against my headache. I stood there, shivering in my pajamas, clutching a tube of cheap concealer I had found in the bottom of an old makeup bag I left here 5 years ago. I was 29 years old, a data analyst for a major logistics firm in Aurora Heights. Yet here I was, huddled in the house I grew up in, trying to paint over reality like a child hiding a bad report card. I squeezed the beige liquid onto my fingertips. It was too orange for my winter skin, but it had to work. My hands were shaking, not the subtle tremor of caffeine withdrawal, but the violent, rattling shake of adrenaline that had not left my system since 11 o'clock the previous night. That was when I had driven out of the city, tearing down the interstate at 80 miles an hour while tears blurred the road ahead. I dabbed the makeup onto my left wrist first. The bruise there was shaped like a thumbprint, a perfect, dark fossil of where Ethan had grabbed me. "Just a misunderstanding," he had said. "Just an accident," he had promised. I hissed through my teeth as I touched the tender skin over my ribs. That was from the edge of the dining table. He had not meant to push me that hard. He claimed he was just stressed about the investment portfolio. He was just passionate. I had stared at him, the man I was supposed to marry in 6 months, and I saw a stranger wearing his face. So I ran. I ran all the way back to Redwood Falls, to the safety of my childhood home, or at least, the place that was supposed to be safe. I pulled the sleeves of my red sweater down, stretching the wool until it hooked over my thumbs. It was a nervous habit I had never outgrown. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped out into the hallway. The house smelled of cinnamon, pine, and aggressive cleanliness. In the kitchen, the scene was picture perfect. It was a Norman Rockwell painting if Rockwell had been obsessed with surveillance and public relations. My mother, Patricia, was by the double oven, wearing an apron that looked like it had been ironed with starch. She was arranging gingerbread cookies on a silver platter with surgical precision. She did not look up when I entered. She was too busy calculating the geometry of the cookie display. My father, Mark, was standing by the breakfast nook, frowning at the tablecloth. "This is not straight, Patricia," he said, his voice tight. "It is straight, Mark," she replied without turning. "It is the way the light hits it." "It needs to be perfect," he muttered, smoothing a microscopic wrinkle with his hand. The CEO of his old firm was coming by for drinks at noon. The neighbors were coming at 2. Appearance was the currency of the Monroe household, and inflation was high this year. "Good morning," I said, my voice sounding thin and brittle. Dad glanced at me. He did not smile. He looked at the clock on the wall. "You are up late," he said. "It is almost 9. We have a schedule. Lila." "I barely slept," I said, walking toward the coffee pot. My side throbbed with every step. "I need coffee." Mom finally turned around. Her eyes scanned me, not looking for affection, but for flaws. She frowned at my hair, then at my old sweater. "You are not wearing that when the guests arrive." "Are you?" she asked. "Caroline is bringing those cashmere wraps she bought in Paris. You should ask to borrow one. You look washed out." "I am fine." "Mom," I said, reaching for a mug. As I reached up to the cabinet, the wool of my sweater slipped. It was just for a second. The sleeve rode up my forearm, exposing the 3 inches of skin I had just frantically tried to cover. The concealer was there, but it was not enough to hide the dark, angry welt where the blood had pooled under the skin. Mom gasped. It was a sharp intake of air that sounded less like shock and more like annoyance. She crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed my hand, yanking it down. I winced, the pain shooting up my arm. "Lila," she hissed, looking toward the window as if the neighbors could see through the brick walls. "What is that?" I pulled my arm back, cradling it against my chest. "It is nothing," I said, though my heart began to hammer against my ribs. "That is not nothing," she said, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "It looks like you were in a brawl. Did you get into a fight? Is that why you came home in the middle of the night? What will the Millers think if they see that?" Dad turned from the table. He saw the way I was holding my arm. He did not rush over to check if I was broken. He did not ask if I needed ice or a doctor. He stood his ground, his face hardening into a look I knew well. It was the look he wore when the lawn service missed a patch of grass. "What did you do now?" he asked. "I did not do anything," I said, the injustice rising in my throat like bile. "It was Ethan. We got into an argument. He got physical." The kitchen went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the festive Christmas jazz playing softly from the smart speaker in the corner. I waited for the outrage. I waited for my father to ask where Ethan was, to threaten to call the police, to act like a father. Instead, Mark Monroe sighed. It was a long, heavy exhale of disappointment. "Lila," he said, walking over to the island and leaning on it, "do not ruin the holiday for everyone." I stared at him. "Excuse me?" "I have invited my old boss," he said, counting the points off on his fingers. "Your mother has spent $300 on the roast alone. We have people coming in 3 hours. Do not make everything dramatic." "Dramatic?" I repeated, my voice rising an octave. "Dad," he pushed me into a table. "I have bruises on my ribs. I drove here because I was scared." "Lower your voice," Mom snapped, glancing at the hallway. "Caroline is still sleeping. We do not need to wake her up with your hysteria." "It is not hysteria," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "Why are you not listening to me?" "We are listening," Dad said, his tone dismissive. "But we also know you. Lila, you always choose these intense men. You always have these blow-ups. Remember that musician you dated 2 years ago? The one with the motorcycle?" "He did not hit me either," I argued, feeling like I was losing my mind. "We just broke up." Dad waved his hand, dismissing the details of my life as if they were irrelevant trivia. "Look," he said sternly, "whatever happened between you and Ethan is a private matter. It is messy, and we do not do messy on Christmas. You are going to go upstairs, put on a long-sleeved blouse, maybe a jacket, and you are going to smile. You are going to tell everyone that Ethan had a last-minute business trip to Chicago. Do you understand?" "But," I started. "No buts." He cut me off. "I will not have this day overshadowed by your poor judgment in men. If the neighbors see you moping around with bruises, what does that say about this house? What does that look like for us?" I stood there, stunned. The pain in my side was nothing compared to the cold hollow opening up in my chest. They did not care. They genuinely did not care that I was hurt. They only cared that my pain might leave a stain on their pristine holiday tablecloth. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps on the stairs announced the arrival of the golden child. Caroline swept into the kitchen like a breath of fresh, expensive air. She was wearing a silk pajama set that probably cost more than my car payment. Her hair was already perfectly tousled, her skin glowing with the kind of health that only money and low stress can buy. "Merry Christmas, family," she chirped, holding up a stack of perfectly wrapped gifts. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," Mom said, her voice instantly shifting from harsh whisper to sugary warmth. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a baby," Caroline said, setting the gifts on the counter. She looked at me, her smile faltering just a fraction. "Oh, hi, Lila. I did not know you were actually coming. Dad said you might be too busy with work." I decided to surprise everyone. I said, my voice flat. Caroline walked over to the fridge and pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. She noticed me clutching my arm. "What is wrong with you?" she asked, cracking the bottle open. "You look like you are in pain." I bumped into something," I lied. the words tasting like ash. Caroline laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound. "Classic Lila," she said, turning to Mom. "Remember the time she tripped over her own graduation gown? You have always been so clumsy. You really need to work on your spatial awareness." Dad chuckled, actually chuckled. "She gets it from your aunt," he said, relaxing now that the narrative had shifted from domestic abuse to family comedy. Elaine was always walking into walls, too. The mention of Aunt Elaine made the air in the room shift, but only for a second. Mom quickly jumped in. "Well, let us get breakfast on the table," she said, clapping her hands. "Lila, help me with the napkins. And please, fix your face. You look like a ghost." I spent the next hour moving like a robot. I folded napkins into swans. I set out the good crystal. I listened to Caroline talk about her residency applications and the new Audi her boyfriend was thinking of buying. I sat at the dining table, the smell of roast beef making my stomach turn. The atmosphere was heavy, suffocating. It felt like the air pressure in the room had been cranked up to 1,000 pounds per square inch. Every time I moved my arm, a fresh spike of pain shot through me, reminding me of the truth I was forced to swallow. I looked around the table. Dad was checking his watch, worried about the time. Mom was adjusting the centerpiece, worried about the aesthetic. Caroline was checking her phone, worried about her social media feed. I was invisible. I was a prop in their stage play of a happy family. I looked at the reflection in the china cabinet glass. I saw myself, small and pale, drowning in the red sweater. I realized then that I could disappear completely, and they would just replace me with a cardboard cutout as long as it smiled and wore the right clothes. The camera in my mind panned across their faces. They were not evil. I told myself that would be easier. They were just empty. They were hollow shells polished to a high shine, terrified that a single crack would reveal the nothingness inside. "Lila," Mom whispered sharply, kicking me under the table. "Stop staring into space. You are slouching." I straightened up, wincing as my ribs protested. "And pull your sleeve down," she hissed, leaning over to tug at my cuff. "The concealer is wearing off. God, if anyone sees that." She was reaching for me, her manicured nails digging into the fabric of my sweater, trying to hide the evidence of my pain so she could protect her reputation. "Smile," she commanded. "The guests will be here any minute." I tried to force the corners of my mouth up. I tried to play the part, but the lie was stuck in my throat. Just then, a thunderous knocking echoed through the house. It was not the polite rap of a neighbor. It was not the confident ring of a CEO. It was a heavy, demanding pounding that shook the heavy oak door in its frame. Dad frowned, dropping his fork. "Who on earth is that?" he asked. "The Millers are not due for hours." Mom froze, her hands still gripping my sleeve. The knocking came again, louder this time. I looked toward the hallway. My heart began to race, beating a frantic rhythm against my bruised ribs. I knew that knock. I had not heard it in 15 years, but I knew it. Dad stood up, looking annoyed. "Probably a delivery driver lost on a holiday," he grumbled, throwing his napkin on the table. "I will get it." He marched to the door. I turned in my chair, unable to look away. Mom let go of my arm, her face paling. We heard the lock click. The door swung open. A gust of cold winter wind rushed into the hallway, carrying snowflakes and the scent of wood smoke. And then, a voice cut through the warm, stifling air of the Monroe house like a serrated knife. "Merry Christmas, Mark," the voice said. It was deep, raspy, and completely devoid of fear. I stood up, my legs trembling. Dad stepped back, blocking the view for a second, but then the figure pushed past him. A woman stood in the entryway. She was wearing a heavy wool coat that had seen better days, dusting snow off her shoulders with aggressive swipes. Her hair was gray and wild, windblown from the storm outside, but her eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, dangerous. It was Aunt Elaine Carter, the woman whose name had been forbidden in this house since I was 12 years old. She did not look at Dad. She did not look at the expensive decorations or the terrified look on Mom's face. Her eyes scanned the room, bypassing Caroline, bypassing the perfect table setting, and landing squarely on me. She walked straight into the kitchen, her boots leaving muddy tracks on the pristine white tile. The silence was absolute. Even the Christmas jazz seemed to stop. Elaine stopped 3 feet away from me. Her gaze dropped to my wrist, where the sleeve had been pulled up by Mom's tugging. She saw the purple mark. She saw the yellow edges. She looked up at my face, and for the first time that morning, someone actually looked at me. "Who did that to you?" she asked. Her voice was so cold, so quiet, that it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Dad rushed into the kitchen behind her. "Elaine, you cannot just barge in here," he shouted, though his voice wavered. "We have guests coming." Elaine did not even blink. She kept her eyes locked on mine, waiting for an answer, offering me a lifeline I did not know I was allowed to grab. The suffocating pressure in the room cracked, and for the first time in my life, I wondered what would happen if I just let it shatter. The silence in the kitchen following Aunt Elaine's question was heavy, but to me, it felt familiar. It was the same silence that had filled the hallways of this house for 20 years. It was the silence of things being swept under the rug, the silence of breath being held, the silence of a family pretending that the cracks in the foundation were just part of the decorative molding. As I looked at Elaine, the present moment seemed to dissolve, melting away into the gray, muted colors of 1,000 Christmases past. I was never the main character in the Monroe family story. I was the editor. I was the stagehand. I was the one who made sure the lighting was right so that the stars could shine. And in Redwood Falls, the star was always, undeniably, my sister Caroline. Growing up, the holiday season did not begin with the first snowfall or the first carol on the radio. It began when Caroline came home. The energy in the house would shift, aligning itself to her orbit. Caroline, with her blonde hair that fell in perfect, natural waves. Caroline, the captain of the cheerleading squad. Caroline, the future pediatrician who knew exactly how to charm the deacons at the First Methodist Church. My parents, Mark and Patricia, loved to tell people that they sacrificed everything for their children. They repeated this phrase like a mantra at dinner parties and church socials. We gave up our summers. We worked double shifts. We did it all for the girls. But even as a child, I knew the mathematics of that statement were flawed. The sacrifice was a resource, and 90% of it was allocated to one account. I remembered the Christmas of my junior year in high school. I had just won the state coding competition, a feat that had required me to spend 3 months staying up until 2 in the morning, debugging lines of Python until my eyes burned. I had come home with a gold medal and a certificate that I had placed on the kitchen counter, hoping it might earn a spot on the refrigerator. When I walked into the living room that Christmas Eve, the house was vibrating with excitement, but it was not for me. Caroline had just been accepted early decision to a prestigious pre-med program. My medal had been moved to the top of the microwave, buried under a stack of unopened holiday greeting cards. During dinner that night, I tried to bring it up. I waited for a lull in the conversation, a small gap between my father's monologue about the cost of heating oil and my mother's critique of the choir director's hemline. "I think I might want to study computer science," I said, my voice small over the clinking of silverware. The judge at the competition said I had a natural aptitude for data architecture. My mother did not even look up from her plate. She was busy cutting a piece of ham into a perfect square. "That is nice, dear," she said vaguely. "Oh, Mark, did you tell the Millers about Caroline's acceptance letter? We need to make sure it is in the Christmas newsletter. We cannot let the Hendersons outshine us this year. Their son only got into state." Dad beamed, turning his full attention to my sister. "Your mother is right," he said, raising his wine glass. "We have a doctor in the family. That is real prestige. That is a legacy to Caroline." I raised my glass of sparkling cider, but nobody clinked it. I drank alone, the bubbles burning my throat. The conversation moved on, rolling over me like a tank, flattening my achievement until it was nothing more than roadkill in the rearview mirror of Caroline's success. It was not malicious. I told myself then, It was just gravity. Large objects attracted more attention than small ones. This dynamic was most painful during the ritual of gift-giving. The Monroe family Christmas morning was a theatrical production, choreographed by my father to maximize visual impact. We had to wait on the stairs until the lighting was adjusted. We had to wear matching pajamas for the photos. I could chart the history of my invisibility through the gifts I received. The year Caroline turned 18, she sat in the center of the living room, surrounded by a mountain of boxes wrapped in silver and gold paper. She tore open box after box, revealing designer handbags, a cashmere coat, a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the lights of the tree. "Oh, Daddy, it is too much," she squealed, holding the bracelet up to the light. "Nothing is too much for my girl," Dad said, his chest puffing out. "You need to look the part at university. You will be meeting important people." Then it was my turn. I sat in the corner, near the drafty window. I had one box. It was heavy and rectangular, wrapped in sensible brown paper. I opened it. It was a 2-terabyte external hard drive and a pack of high-speed Ethernet cables. My mother smiled at me, a tight, polite expression she usually reserved for bank tellers. "We know how much you like your computer things, Lila," she said, "and since you are always complaining about running out of space for your files, we thought this was practical." "It costs $100, Dad added helpfully. "It is top of the line." I looked at the gray plastic brick in my lap. Then I looked at the diamond bracelet on Caroline's wrist. "Thank you," I said. "It is very useful." "Why does Caroline get jewelry?" I asked later, when I was helping Mom load the dishwasher. Mom sighed, wiping a spot of grease off the granite counter. "Oh, stop it. Lila, do not be jealous. It is unbecoming. Caroline needs those things. She is out there in the world, meeting people, networking. She is representing the family. You? Well, you are more of an indoor person, aren't you? You do not need flash. You are functional." Functional, that was the word that defined my existence. I was the utility player. I was the infrastructure. While Caroline slept in on Christmas morning, exhausted from being the center of attention, I was the one up at 6 in the morning. I was the one fixing the string of lights on the front porch, because Dad would lose his temper if a single bulb was out. I was the one crawling behind the entertainment center to reset the router because the Wi-Fi was spotty and Mom needed to upload the family photos to Facebook immediately. "Lila, the internet is down again," Mom would shout from the living room. "Fix it, Will you? We are losing engagement on the post." And I would fix it. I would tape the wires. I would scrub the roasting pans. I would sweep the pine needles. I made the stage perfect so they could act out the play of the happy Monroe family without tripping over the reality of who we actually were. I learned to shrink. I learned that my emotions were inconvenient obstacles to the holiday spirit. One year, when I was perhaps 14, I came home from school in tears because a group of girls had locked me in the gym locker room and written "freak" on my backpack with a permanent marker. It was 3 days before Christmas. I tried to tell my father. He was in the living room, hanging the star on the tree. He looked at my tear-stained face, then at the clock. "Lila," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet register. "Look at this room. Look at the tree. We are about to have the neighbors over for caroling." "But Dad, they ruined my bag." I sobbed. "Stop crying," he commanded. "If you have something unpleasant to talk about, save it for January. Do not bring that negative energy into this house during the Lord's birthday. If you cannot smile, go to your room until you can." So I went to my room, and I stayed there. And when I came down 3 hours later, I smiled. I smiled until my jaw ached. I smiled while the neighbors sang Silent Night, feeling the word "freak" burning a hole through the canvas of my backpack upstairs. That was the lesson. The image matters more than the injury. Silence is the price of admission to this family. But there was a ghost in the machine of our family history. Aunt Elaine. She was the glitch in the Monroe Matrix. She was rarely mentioned, and when she was, it was always with a shake of the head or a lowered voice. "Why does Aunt Elaine never come for dinner?" I asked once when I was 12. We were setting the table for Thanksgiving. Mom was polishing the silver forks, rubbing them so hard I thought the metal might wear away. "Your aunt has issues, Lila," Mom said, not meeting my eyes. "She is difficult. She likes to cause drama." "What kind of drama?" I pressed. "She just does not know how to be part of a family." Mom snapped. "She married that awful man. Then she made a huge scene when they divorced. She embarrassed your father. She is selfish, and we do not invite selfish people to this table." But I had a memory, a fragment of a memory, buried deep under layers of repression and forced cheerfulness. I must have been 5 or 6 years old. It was a Christmas long before the silence had completely taken over. There was shouting in the living room, loud, angry shouting. Not the passive-aggressive comments I was used to, but real, raw anger. I was hiding behind the sofa, clutching a stuffed bear. I was terrified. Then, strong hands picked me up. It was Aunt Elaine. She smelled like rain and peppermint. She did not tell me to stop crying. She did not tell me to smile for the neighbors. She carried me out to the front porch, away from the yelling inside. The air was biting cold, but she wrapped her wool coat around me, creating a warm, dark cocoon. She looked me in the eyes. Her face was younger then, less lined, but her eyes were just as fierce. "Listen to me, Lila," she whispered. "Not everything that glitters is love. Just because it shines does not mean it is gold. Sometimes it is just broken glass." Before I could ask her what she meant, the front door banged open. My father stood there, silhouetted against the warm light of the hallway. He looked like a giant. "Elaine," he roared, "put her down. Do not you dare poison her mind with your bitterness. Get out. If you cannot follow the rules, get out." Elaine had looked at him, then back at me. She squeezed my hand once, tight. "I am not the one poisoning her, Mark," she said softly. Then she set me down and walked into the snow. That was the last time I saw her at Christmas. The memory that haunted me the most, however, was not of shouting. It was of a photograph. It was the year I turned 10. It was a snowy morning, perfect for the family Christmas card. Dad had set up the tripod in the front yard. He wanted a shot of the whole family in front of the snow-covered house. "Okay, everyone get in position," he yelled, adjusting the timer. Mom smoothed her coat. Caroline, dressed in a red velvet dress and white tights, stood front and center, holding a large candy cane. "Lila, move to the left," Dad shouted. "No, further left. You are blocking the view of the wreath on the door." I moved. I kept moving until I was standing in the deep snow near the edge of the frame. Dad ran to join the group. He put his arm around Mom. Mom put her hand on Caroline's shoulder. They all smiled. A dazzling display of teeth and happiness. I waited for the flash. I smiled too, though my boots were full of snow and my toes were numb. But then, Dad frowned. "The composition is off," he muttered. He ran back to the camera. "Lila," he said, looking through the viewfinder, "you are throwing off the balance. Step out for a second. We will take one of just the 3 of us. Then we will add you back in." I stepped out of the frame. I walked over to the driveway, standing by the cold metal of the family sedan. "Ready?" Dad called out. 1, 2, 3. Flash. They cheered. "Perfect," Mom cried. "That is the one. That is the card." They huddled around the camera to look at the digital preview. They laughed. They pointed at how cute Caroline looked. I stood by the car, waiting for them to call me back. I waited for them to say, "Okay, Lila, your turn. Come back in." But they did not. "It is freezing out here," Mom said, rubbing her arms. "Let us go inside and have hot cocoa." They turned and walked toward the house. Dad carried the tripod. Mom held Caroline's hand. They walked up the path, laughing, bathed in the warm glow of the porch lights. They forgot me. They actually forgot I was there. I stood alone in the driveway for a long time. I watched them through the front window. I saw them take off their coats. I saw Mom pouring cocoa. I saw them sitting by the fire. It looked like a scene from a movie. It was beautiful. It was perfect. And it was complete without me. I realized then, at 10 years old, that I was not a member of the family. I was an accessory. I was an extra in their movie, liable to be cut from the final edit if I blocked the view of something more important. I walked to the window and pressed my hand against the glass. The cold seeped through my mittens. Inside, it was warm. Inside, they were happy. I looked at the spot on the lawn where I had stood. My footprints were already being filled in by the fresh falling snow. In 10 minutes, there would be no trace that I had been there at all. Standing in the kitchen now, 20 years later, with my wrist throbbing under my sweater and Aunt Elaine staring into my soul, that feeling came rushing back. The feeling of being erased. The feeling of being the glitch. But this time, the glitch was staring back, and she was asking the question that threatened to burn the entire script to ashes. Who did that to you? The past was a map of silence, but for the first time, I was holding a match. The bruise on my side was not just an injury, it was a receipt. It was the physical proof of a transaction I had been making for 2 years, trading my autonomy for the illusion of being wanted. As I stood in that kitchen, with Aunt Elaine's question hanging in the air like smoke, my mind did not go to the pain in my ribs. It went back to the city, to the apartment in Aurora Heights, and to the man who had convinced me that control was the highest form of affection. I had moved to Aurora Heights to escape the suffocating beige silence of Redwood Falls. I had gotten a job at Skytrace Networks, a massive logistics and technology firm where I was a senior data analyst. I was good at it. I understood data. I understood that if you looked at 1,000 chaotic points of light long enough, you could find the constellation. I could predict supply chain bottlenecks, optimize shipping routes, and forecast revenue dips with 99% accuracy. But I could not predict Ethan Cole. Or perhaps, more accurately, I refused to look at the data because I liked the way he made me feel in the beginning. Ethan was in sales. He had that aggressive, shiny charm that works so well in boardrooms and first dates. He was the kind of man who ordered for you at dinner without asking. And at first, it felt like chivalry. After growing up in a house where my presence was barely registered, where I was an inconvenience to be managed, Ethan's intense focus felt like a drug. He watched me. He paid attention to what I wore, who I texted, and where I went. I told myself it was love. I told myself that his jealousy was just passion. When he told me to change my dress because it was too revealing, I thought he was being protective. When he told me my friends from work were boring and I should spend my Friday nights only with him, I thought he just valued our time together. "You are too sensitive. Lila," he would say when I tried to push back. "You always read too much into things. Relax. I am just looking out for you." I had heard that phrase before. I had heard it my entire life. You are too sensitive. You are making a scene. You are ruining the moment. I was preconditioned to believe that my instincts were wrong and that the person shouting at me was right. I was built to be a vessel for other people's emotions, never my own. The violence did not start with a punch. It never does. It started with a grip that was a little too tight during a disagreement about where to spend Thanksgiving. It started with a slammed door that shook the pictures off the wall. It started with a coffee mug swept off the counter, shattering near my bare feet, followed by tears and apologies. "I am so sorry, baby," he would say, burying his face in my neck. "The quota at work is killing me. I am just under so much stress. It was an accident. I did not mean to scare you." And I forgave him. I forgave him because I thought forgiveness was the rent you paid to be loved. I forgave him because, unlike my father who looked through me, Ethan looked at me, even if his gaze was terrifying. But the night before Christmas changed the equation. It was snowing in Aurora Heights. The city was quiet, emptied out by the holiday exodus. We were in our living room, packing to drive down to his parents' house the next morning. Ethan had been drinking, not enough to be sloppy, but enough to sharpen the edge in his voice. He had been talking about an investment opportunity for weeks. A friend of a friend had a startup. A sure thing. He needed capital. He sat me down on the sofa, holding a glass of scotch. "Lila, I need you to transfer $20,000 from your savings account, he said. It was not a question. I looked up from my laptop. I had worked hard for that money. It was my safety net. It was the only thing that made me feel like I owned my life. Ethan, we talked about this, I said, keeping my voice steady. I am not comfortable with it. The business plan does not make sense. There is no revenue model. He stood up. The charm evaporated. The salesman was gone, replaced by the manager who was missing his numbers. You do not trust me? He asked, his voice rising. It is not about trust, I said. It is my money. It is our future, he shouted. He paced around the coffee table. You are so selfish. Lila, you hoard everything. You hoard your feelings. You hoard your money. You are just like your father described you. Cold. That stung. He knew exactly where to insert the needle. I am not giving you the money. Ethan, I said, closing my laptop, and I think we need to talk about where this relationship is going. I stood up to leave the room. I wanted to go to the bedroom, lock the door, and sleep. He moved faster than I expected. He grabbed my arm, not a romantic hold, a restraint. Sit down, he growled. We are not done talking. Let go of me, I said, panic rising in my chest. He squeezed harder. I could feel his fingers digging into the soft flesh of my wrist, pressing against the bone. You always run away, he sneered. You are pathetic. I tried to pull away. I twisted my body, using my weight to break his grip. And then he shoved me. It was a hard, violent push. I stumbled back, my feet tangled in the rug. I fell, crashing sideways into the heavy oak dining table. The edge of the table caught me right in the ribs. The pain was blinding. It was a sharp, white-hot explosion that sucked the air out of my lungs. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping, clutching my side. The room went silent. Ethan stood there, his hand still outstretched. He looked at me, then at his hand, as if he did not understand how the two were connected. Lila, he stammered. I looked up at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. But it was not fear for me. It was fear for himself. He was afraid of what he had done. Not because I was hurt, but because he had lost control of the narrative. I scrambled backward, crab-walking across the floor until my back hit the wall. Stay away from me, I gasped. He took a step forward. Baby. I slipped. I did not mean to push you that hard. You lost your balance. I did not listen. The adrenaline hit me like a shot of epinephrine. I grabbed the first thing I could reach, my work bag, which contained my laptop and my external hard drive. The logic of my survival kicked in. I did not grab clothes. I did not grab a toothbrush. I grabbed my data. I ran for the door. Lila, wait, you are being dramatic, he yelled after me. I slammed the apartment door and sprinted down the 3 flights of stairs, ignoring the stabbing pain in my side. I burst out into the cold night air, unlocked my car, and threw myself into the driver's seat. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice before I could start the ignition. I peeled out of the parking lot, tires spinning on the fresh snow. I did not look back. I drove for 6 hours. The interstate was a desolate ribbon of black asphalt, cutting through the white landscape. I drove in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of the engine and the terrifying rhythm of my own thoughts. Why was I driving to Redwood Falls? That was the question that haunted me with every mile marker. Why? When I was fleeing a man who hurt me, was I running back to the people who had taught me how to take it? It was a sick, magnetic pull. I was a homing pigeon with broken wings, flying back to the coop where they clipped them in the first place. I had nowhere else to go. I had isolated myself for Ethan. I had drifted away from my college friends. I had kept my work colleagues at a professional distance. Redwood Falls was not a sanctuary. It was just the devil I knew. I pulled into the driveway at 3 a.m. The house was dark, a looming shadow against the snowy sky. The perfect wreath on the door looked black in the moonlight. I sat in the car for 10 minutes, just breathing. My ribs throbbed. My wrist was already turning a deep, ugly purple. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red. My hair was a mess. I looked like a victim, and I hated it. Finally, I got out. I walked up the path I had shoveled 1,000 times as a child. I rang the doorbell. It took a long time. Eventually, the porch light flicked on. The heavy door opened. My father stood there. He was wearing his plaid pajamas and a bathrobe. His hair was tousled, his face puffy with sleep. He did not open the door wide. He peered out through the crack, blocking the warmth from escaping. "Lila?" he asked, his voice rough. "What time is it?" "It is 3 a.m. Dad," I said, shivering. "Can I come in?" He opened the door just enough for me to slip through, then immediately closed it and engaged the deadbolt. He looked out the peephole, scanning the street. "Is that your car?" he asked. "Why is it parked so crookedly?" "I just drove 6 hours. Dad, I am exhausted." He turned to look at me in the hallway light. He saw my coat, buttoned wrong. He saw the desperation in my posture. "What happened?" he asked. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice trembling. "No, it is not okay. Ethan, we had a fight." "A fight?" Dad rubbed his face, looking annoyed. "You drove all this way in the middle of the night because of an argument?" "He hurt me." "Dad," I whispered. I started to unbutton my coat to show him. I wanted him to see. I wanted my father, the man who was supposed to protect me, to see the violence stamped on my skin. But he held up a hand. "Keep your coat on. Lila, it is freezing in here." He sighed, a sound of pure inconvenience. "Look," he said, keeping his voice low so as not to wake my mother. "Relationships are hard. Men get hot-headed sometimes. They have a lot of pressure on them. Ethan is a good guy. He has a good job. He has a future." "He hurt me," I repeated, louder this time. "He pushed me." Dad winced at the volume. "Shh, keep it down. You will wake your mother. She has been baking all day for tomorrow. She is exhausted." He put a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy, patronizing. "You are probably overreacting," he said. "You are tired. You are emotional. It happens. You two probably just need some space. But listen to me, Lila." He leaned in, his eyes hard and serious. "Tomorrow is Christmas. We have guests coming, important guests. I do not want any drama. Whatever happened between you and Ethan, keep it to yourself for now. Do not make a big deal out of it." I stared at him. The pain in my ribs seemed to pulse in time with his words. "You want me to pretend nothing happened?" I asked. "I want you to be an adult," he corrected. "Handle your business privately. Do not bring a cloud over this house. Do not ruin the holiday for everyone." There it was, the sentence that broke the camel's back. I realized then, standing in the dim hallway with my father, that I had never really left this house. I had just moved to a different location with a different man who followed the same rulebook. Ethan pushed me because he knew he could. Mark dismissed me because he knew I would take it. They were the same. The culture of silence was not a bug in the system. It was the operating system, and I had been running it faithfully for 29 years. "Okay, Dad," I said softly. My voice sounded dead to my own ears. "I will not ruin the holiday." "Good girl," he said, patting my shoulder. "There is a spare blanket in the den. Try to get some sleep. We have a big day tomorrow." He turned and walked back up the stairs, leaving me alone in the dark hallway. I did not sleep in the den. I sat in the kitchen until the sun came up, watching the light slowly reveal the perfect, spotless surfaces of my prison. I touched the bruise on my wrist. It was tender, but the pain felt different now. It felt clarifying. When Aunt Elaine walked through that door 5 hours later and asked who did this to me, she was not just asking about the bruise. She was asking who had broken me enough to make me think I deserved it. And for the first time, looking at my father's terrified, angry face as he tried to silence her, I knew the answer. It was not just Ethan. It was Mark. It was the house. It was the silence. And I was done being quiet. The temperature in the kitchen seemed to drop 10 degrees. the moment Aunt Elaine stepped across the threshold. She did not wait for an invitation. She did not wipe her boots on the welcome mat that my mother had replaced just yesterday. She walked in with the winter wind clinging to her dark wool coat, snowflakes melting on her graying hair like unshed tears. Her presence was a physical weight, displacing the carefully curated atmosphere of cinnamon spice and forced cheer that my parents had spent all morning constructing. Patricia, my mother, was the first to react. Though it was a reflex born of panic rather than hospitality, she pasted a bright, brittle smile onto her face and moved quickly to stand between me and the door. It was a subtle maneuver, a slight shift of her hips intended to block Elaine's line of sight, effectively erasing me from the frame. "Elaine," Mom chirped, her voice pitching too high. "We were not expecting you. The family is just in the middle of preparing breakfast. We are very busy." Elaine did not look at her. Her eyes, sharp and dark like polished flint, swept the room. They ignored the expensive garland on the mantel. They ignored the towering tree with its color-coordinated ornaments. They ignored Caroline, who was holding her coffee mug halfway to her mouth, frozen in surprise. Elaine's gaze found me instantly, peering around the edge of my mother's shoulder. It was as if she had a radar for the things this family tried to hide. She took 2 steps forward, the heels of her boots clicking sharply on the tile. Mom tried to hold her ground, but Elaine simply walked around her, an icebreaker cutting through thin ice. She stopped directly in front of me. The smell of cold air and old tobacco clung to her coat, a stark contrast to the cloying scent of vanilla extract filling the kitchen. She looked down at my hands, which were gripping the edge of the granite countertop so hard my knuckles were white. The sleeve of my red sweater had ridden up again. The concealer I had applied in the bathroom was failing. The bruise was undeniable now, a dark, violent bloom against my pale skin. Elaine did not gasp. She did not cover her mouth in mock horror. She simply stared at it for a long, heavy second. Then she looked up, locking her eyes with mine. "Who did that to you?" she asked. Her voice was not loud, but it possessed a clarity that cut through the room like a diamond cutter. It was a question that demanded an answer, devoid of the polite euphemisms we usually spoke in. The kitchen went dead silent. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to stop. Mark, my father, stepped forward then. He moved with the aggressive, jerky energy of a stage manager trying to fix a prop that had fallen over during a live performance. "Elaine," he said, his voice dropping to a warning growl, "do not start this. Do not come into my house and start making accusations." "It is a simple question." "Mark," Elaine said, not breaking eye contact with me. "It is a misunderstanding," Dad snapped. He moved to stand next to Mom, presenting a united front of denial. "Lila had a small accident. She is clumsy. You know how she is. Do not make a scene. Do not ruin the holiday like you did back then." "Like I did back then?" Elaine repeated, turning slowly to face him. Her expression was unreadable, but the tension in her jaw was visible. "You know exactly what I mean," Dad said, his face flushing red. "You always have to make everything about you. You always have to bring the drama. We have guests coming in 2 hours. I will not have you upsetting Patricia and the girls with your hysteria." "Hysteria," Elaine said, testing the word on her tongue like it was spoiled milk. "Is that what we are calling it today?" She turned her back on him. It was a dismissal so complete it felt like a slap. She pulled out one of the heavy oak chairs from the breakfast table, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. She sat down, bringing herself to my eye level. "Sit down, Lila," she said softly. I looked at my father. He was glaring at me, his eyes wide with a silent command. "Do not say a word." I looked at my mother. She was wringing her hands in her apron, looking at the floor. I sat down. My legs felt like water. Elaine reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was solid. It was the first real thing I had felt since I walked into the house at 3 a.m. "Tell me," she said, "and do not lie to me. I know what a doorframe looks like. I know what a fall looks like. That is a handprint. Lila, who put it there?" I opened my mouth, but the words stuck in my throat. The script was burned into my brain. Don't ruin the holiday. Don't be dramatic. Keep the peace. I started, my voice trembling. Just say it, Elaine whispered. Ethan! I choked out. It was Ethan. And what happened? She asked. We were arguing, I said, tears starting to spill over. Hot and fast. About money. He wanted my savings. I said no. He got angry. He said he slipped. He said it was an accident. And then? Elaine prompted. And then I ran. I whispered. I got in my car and I drove here, because I was scared. The truth hung in the air, naked and ugly. I waited for the explosion. I waited for my father to yell at me for airing our dirty laundry. Instead, Elaine nodded. She did not look surprised. She looked validated. And what did your father say when you got here? She asked. I flinched. I could feel Dad's eyes burning holes into the side of my head. He told me. I took a shaky breath. He told me that men get stressed. He told me not to make it a big deal. He told me not to ruin Christmas. Elaine released my hand. She sat back in her chair, a strange, grim smile touching her lips. She began to unbutton the cuff of her heavy coat. Underneath, she wore a thick wool sweater. She rolled up the left sleeve, pushing the fabric past her wrist, past her elbow. There, on the inside of her forearm, was a long, jagged line of pale, silvery tissue. It was an old scar, decades old, but it was deep. Do you see this? She asked, holding her arm out for everyone to see. My mother made a small, strangled noise in her throat. Put that away. Elaine, Dad hissed, have some decency. Decency? Elaine laughed. A short, sharp bark. You want to talk about decency? Mark? Let us talk about 1995. She turned to me, her eyes burning with a fierce intensity. Christmas Eve, 1995, she said. I came to this house. My husband at the time, Robert, had thrown a glass vase at me. It shattered against the wall, and a piece of it sliced my arm open. I was bleeding. I was terrified. I came here because you were my family. I stared at the scar. I remembered the shouting. I remembered her carrying me out to the porch. And do you know what your father told me? Elaine continued, her voice rising. He stood in this very kitchen, while Patricia bandaged me up so I would not bleed on the carpet. And he told me that Robert was a good man who was just under a lot of pressure at the firm. He told me that if I called the police, it would embarrass the family. He told me to go home, put on a long-sleeve shirt, and come back for dinner. She stood up, slamming her hand down on the table. The silverware rattled. He told me not to ruin the holiday, she shouted. The silence that followed was absolute. My father's face had gone from red to a patchy, sickly white. My mother was crying silently, tears tracking through her perfect foundation. Caroline was staring at Dad as if she had never seen him before. You are a liar, Dad spat, though his voice lacked its usual booming authority. You were drunk. You were unstable. You left him because you were selfish. I left him because he would have killed me, Elaine roared back. And I left this family because you would have let him do it as long as the neighbors did not hear the scream. She turned back to me. The anger vanished from her face, replaced by an urgent, desperate plea. Lila, listen to me. They did it to me. And now they are doing it to you. They are handing you the same script and expecting you to play the same role. They care more about the centerpiece on that table than they do about the bruise on your ribs. She gestured around the kitchen, at the gleaming appliances, the perfect cookies, the facade of domestic bliss. Look at this place, she said. It is a stage, and you are just a prop. If you stay here, if you cover that bruise and smile for the guests, you are signing a contract. You are telling yourself that your pain is less important than their comfort. And once you sign that, Lila, you never get your voice back. Elaine, get out of my house, Dad said. He was shaking. He pointed a trembling finger at the door. Get out. You are not welcome here. You are poison. I am not going anywhere without her, Elaine said, nodding at me. You are trying to steal my daughter because you could never keep a family of your own. Dad yelled. It was a low blow, a cruel, vicious strike aimed at her deepest insecurity. You are a lonely, bitter old woman who wants everyone else to be as miserable as you are. Lila is staying here. She belongs here. Elaine ignored him completely. She did not even flinch at the insult. She looked only at me. Lila, she said, her voice steady and calm. I have a car outside. It is warm. It is not fancy, but it is safe. I am driving back to Riverview City. I have a guest room. It is small, but nobody will tell you to wear long sleeves in it. She extended her hand toward me again. You have a choice, she said. You can stay here. You can listen to your father. You can put on a smile and go back to Ethan and hope that next time he does not push you harder. You can keep the holiday perfect for the neighbors. Or, she continued, you can stand up. You can walk out that door with me. You can leave the tablecloths and the turkey and the lies. You can decide that your safety matters more than their reputation. I looked at her hand. It was a worker's hand, unmanicured, weathered, real. Then I looked at my mother. Patricia was wiping her eyes, composing herself. Lila, honey, she whispered, her voice trembling with desperation. Please, the Millers will be here soon. Just go upstairs and change. We can talk about this later. Do not make a mistake you will regret. It was the same plea, the same loop. Later, not now. Hide it. I looked at Caroline, my sister, the golden child. She was looking at my bruise. Then she looked at Dad. There was fear in her eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of the crack that had just appeared in her perfect world. She did not say anything. She did not defend me. She just watched. I looked at Dad. He was not looking at me with concern. He was looking at the clock. He was calculating how much time he had to fix the damage before the audience arrived. I stood up. My ribs screamed in protest, a sharp reminder of the reality I had been trying to ignore. Lila, sit down, Dad ordered. I looked at him, really looked at him. For 29 years, his voice had been the law. His approval had been the sun I orbited. But now, seeing him standing there in his pajamas, terrified of a middle-aged woman in a wool coat, he looked small. He looked pathetic. No, I said. The word felt strange in my mouth, heavy, solid. What did you say to me? He asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. I said no, I repeated, louder this time. I turned to Aunt Elaine. I reached out and took her hand. It was warm. I am going with you, I said. Lila, Mom cried out, stepping forward. You cannot be serious. You are going to leave on Christmas morning? What will we tell people? Tell them whatever you want, I said, feeling a strange, cold clarity washing over me. Tell them I am sick. Tell them I am working. Tell them I died. I do not care. I turned to walk out of the kitchen. If you walk out that door, Dad shouted, his voice cracking, do not bother coming back. I mean it, Lila. You are choosing her over us. You are choosing to be an outcast. I will not support you. I will not help you with a single cent. I stopped. I turned back one last time. You never helped me. Dad, I said, you just paid for my silence, and the price has gone up. I grabbed my purse from the counter. I did not go upstairs to pack a bag. I did not get my toothbrush. I did not get the gifts I had brought for them. I just tightened my grip on Elaine's hand. Let us go, I said to her. Elaine nodded, a fierce pride burning in her eyes. She put her arm around my shoulders, shielding me, not hiding me. We walked down the hallway, past the family photos where I was always in the background, past the perfect wreath, and out the front door. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it felt good. It felt clean. Behind us, the heavy oak door slammed shut, sealing the perfect Monroe family inside with their secrets. But I was outside. I was bruised. I was tired, and I had no idea where I was going. But for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the pen. My hand was on the doorknob, the cold brass biting into my palm. When the realization hit me like a physical blow, I could leave. I could walk out into the snow with nothing but the clothes on my back and the fire in my chest. But if I did that, I would be leaving behind the only leverage I had left in this world. I stopped. The hallway was silent, the echo of my declarations still bouncing off the walls. Dad was purple with rage. Mom was pale with shock. Aunt Elaine stood by the door, her hand on my shoulder, ready to guide me out. "Wait," I said, my voice breathless. "I need my things." I did not wait for permission. I turned and sprinted up the stairs, taking them two at a time, ignoring the sharp stab of pain in my bruised ribs. I heard my father shout my name, a boom of authoritative anger that usually froze me in my tracks, but today it just made me move faster. I burst into the guest room, my old childhood bedroom, preserved in a state of teenage innocence that I no longer recognized. I grabbed my duffel bag from the floor. I did not fold my clothes. I threw them in. Jeans, sweaters, underwear. But those were just fabrics. I needed my armor. I grabbed my laptop from the desk. Then, I reached into the hidden pocket of my backpack and pulled out the small, silver USB drive. It was an encrypted drive containing the last 3 years of my work for Skytrace Networks, along with several side projects I had been building late at night. Algorithms that tracked shipping anomalies and predictive models for supply chain fraud. I did not know why I had brought it with me when I fled Ethan's apartment, other than a gut instinct that data was the only currency that never lied. I shoved it deep into my coat pocket, zipping it shut. "Lila." My mother appeared in the doorway. She was out of breath, her face flushed. She did not look at the bag. She looked at my arm. "Honey, please," she panted, stepping into the room. "You are being irrational. Just stop for a second." "I am leaving." "Mom," I said, hoisting the bag onto my shoulder. She reached out and grabbed my wrist, the unbruised one, her fingers digging into my skin. Her eyes were wide, frantic. "If you go out there with Elaine, the whole town will talk," she whispered, the words tumbling out fast. "The Millers are pulling into their driveway right now. If they see you storming out with luggage on Christmas morning, what will they think?" I stared at her. I was leaving a house where my father had effectively condoned domestic violence, and her biggest fear was the gossip of the neighbors next door. "Let them talk," I said, yanking my arm back. "Lila, listen to me," she hissed. At least put your coat on properly. Do not let them see your arm. If they see those marks, they will think we treat you badly. They will judge us. Please, for the love of God, pull your sleeve down." There it was, the raw, unfiltered truth. It was not, "Are you okay?" It was, "Do we look okay?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman who had spent 40 years building a prison out of perception. "I am not hiding anything anymore," I said coldly. I pushed past her, heading for the stairs. Dad was waiting at the bottom. He had composed himself, shifting from rage to a slimy, transactional negotiation mode that I recognized from his business calls. "Lila, hold on," he said, holding up a hand. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. I stopped on the bottom step, looking down at him. "You are upset," he said, his voice smooth, reasonable. "I get it. Money is tight. That is why you and Ethan were fighting, right? Financial stress makes people do crazy things." He opened the wallet and pulled out a stack of cash. Emergency holiday money. It must have been $500, maybe more. "Here," he said, extending the bills toward me. "Take this. It will cover your rent for a bit. Go get a hotel room for a night, cool off, and then drive back to Aurora Heights tomorrow. Call Ethan. Sit down like adults. He loves you. Lila, do not throw away a fiancé over one bad night." I looked at the money. It was crisp, clean, and it was a bribe. He was paying me to go back to a man who had shoved me into a table. He was paying me to take my bruises away from his perfect holiday. I felt bile rise in my throat. "You want me to go back to him?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "You want me to go back to the man who did this?" I lifted my shirt slightly, just enough to show the ugly yellow-purple blooming across my ribs. Dad flinched, looking away instantly. "I am offering you a solution," he snapped, his patience fraying. I am offering to help you pay your bills so you do not have to be dramatic. Take the money. Lila, do not be stupid. Elaine stepped forward then. She moved between me and my father, a dark wall of wool and righteous anger. She did not shout. She did not scream. She spoke with a quiet, deadly precision. Put your money away. Mark, she said. This is none of your business, Elaine. Dad spat. It became my business when you decided that a seat in the front pew of the church was worth more than your daughter's life, she said. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Dad's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The brutality of the truth had stripped him of his arguments. Caroline was standing by the Christmas tree, her arms wrapped around herself. She looked small, despite her expensive silk pajamas. She looked from Dad to me, and for a fleeting second, the mask of the golden child slipped. I saw fear in her eyes, real fear. She was watching her safety net unravel, realizing that if her boyfriend ever hit her, this was exactly how our parents would react. Caroline? I said softly. She looked at me, her lip trembling. She took a half step forward, as if she wanted to hug me, as if she wanted to say she was sorry. But then she glanced at the window, where the headlights of the guests' cars were likely sweeping across the lawn. The fear of social ruin won out. She stayed where she was, retreating back into her silence. Good luck, Lila, she whispered, so low I barely heard it. I turned my back on them, or all of them. I walked out the front door, the cold winter air hitting my face like a baptism. Aunt Elaine was right beside me. We walked down the driveway, the snow crunching under our boots. I saw the neighbor, Mrs. Miller, getting out of her car across the street. She waved, holding a casserole dish. I did not wave back. I did not pull my sleeve down. I let the bruise show against the white snow, a mark of my survival. We got into Elaine's car, a 10-year-old sedan that smelled of peppermint tea and old upholstery. It was not a luxury car. The heater rattled as she turned the key. But as we pulled away from the curb, leaving the pristine brick house behind, I felt my lungs expand for the first time in 24 hours. We drove in silence for a long time. The landscape shifted from the manicured suburbs of Redwood Falls to the open highway, and eventually to the gray industrial skyline of Riverview City. What am I going to do? I whispered, staring at the gray road ahead. Elaine did not take her eyes off the road. You are going to breathe, she said. That is the first step. We arrived at her apartment complex an hour later. It was a brick building on the outskirts of the city, simple and unassuming. There was no garland on the door, no perfectly synchronized light show. Her apartment was small. It was filled with books, stacks and stacks of them, and plants that looked like they were thriving. It was messy in a way that felt lived in, not neglected. She led me to a small guest room. It had a single bed with a quilt that looked handmade. Put your things down, she said. I will make tea. I sat on the edge of the bed. My phone was vibrating in my pocket. I pulled it out. 17 missed calls from Ethan, 30 texts. Lila, please, I am sorry. You are overreacting. Pick up the phone. If you do not come back by tonight, I am emptying the joint account. I love you, baby. Please. Then, a notification from my email. It was from Dad. The subject line was simply, disappointed. I opened it. Lila, I hope you are happy. You embarrassed your mother in front of the neighbors. You chose to walk away from a family that has provided everything for you. Do not expect us to bail you out when this tantrum is over. You have betrayed this family. I dropped the phone on the bed as if it were burning. The tears came then. Hot, ugly sobs that shook my entire body. I curled into a ball, clutching my ribs, feeling the weight of my orphanhood crushing me. Elaine appeared in the doorway. She set 2 mugs of tea on the nightstand. She did not tell me to stop crying. She did not tell me to smile. She sat on the floor next to the bed and just waited. When I finally stopped gasping for air, she spoke. You think you lost something today, she said softly, but you did not. You just put down a bag of rocks you have been carrying since you were a child. I have nothing. Aunt Elaine, I whispered. No home. No money. They hate me. They do not hate you, she corrected. They just cannot control you anymore. There is a difference. She took a sip of her tea. Lila, look at me. I sat up, wiping my face. You have spent your whole life trying to be good enough to be protected, she said. You thought if you got good grades, if you stayed quiet, if you married the right man, if you fixed the Wi-Fi, they would keep you safe. I nodded. That was the contract. That is a lie, she said fiercely. You do not have to make your parents proud to deserve protection. You do not have to earn the right to be safe. You are a human being. That is the only qualification you need. Her words hit me harder than Ethan's shove. It was a complete dismantling of my operating system. I had always thought love was a wage I had to earn. Elaine was telling me it was a birthright I had been denied. She stood up and walked over to my duffel bag. She saw the laptop sticking out. You grabbed your computer, she noted. Why? I have work on there, I said, sniffing. Important files. Show me, she said. I hesitated, then opened the laptop. I booted it up, typing in my password. The screen glowed with the familiar blue light of my desktop. I plugged in the USB drive. I opened the folder labeled Skytrace Analytics Backup. Elaine pulled a chair over. She put on a pair of reading glasses. I expected her to be confused. Most people saw my screens as a wall of boring numbers, but Elaine leaned in, her eyes narrowing. I forgot. I said, You used to be an accountant. Forensic accountant, she corrected, before Robert made me quit. I used to find money that people tried very hard to hide. She pointed to a spreadsheet I had built, a complex model visualizing trucking routes and fuel surcharges for one of Skytrace's biggest clients. What is this? She asked, tapping the screen. It is a discrepancy model, I explained, my voice gaining a little strength as I slipped into work mode. I built it to track efficiency. See these red lines? These are routes that are billed but have no GPS confirmation data. They are ghost routes. Elaine stared at the screen. She traced the red line with her finger. And this client, she asked, who is it? I hesitated. It was a client I had been analyzing for months, mostly because their data was so erratic. It is a supply company, I said, a massive one in the Midwest. They move construction materials. Elaine looked at the name at the top of the spreadsheet. Her face went pale, then hard as stone. Monroe Supply Group, she read aloud. I nodded. Dad's company. I started analyzing it because I wanted to help him. I confessed. I wanted to find ways to save him money. I thought if I could show him I saved the company 10%, he would finally be proud of me. Elaine looked at me, then back at the screen. Her eyes were moving fast, scanning the columns of numbers, the dates, the amounts. Lila, she said, her voice low and dangerous. These aren't just inefficiencies. Look at the recurring payments on these ghost routes. Look at the dates. They match up perfectly with the quarterly investment rounds for that shell company Ethan was trying to get you to invest in. I froze. I had never made the connection. I had kept my life with Ethan and my work data in separate boxes. What are you saying? I asked. I am saying, Elaine said, turning to me with a look of terrifying realization, that your father is not just a bad parent. He is washing money, and he is using your fiancé to move it. I stared at the screen. The red lines on the map suddenly looked like veins. My veins. Ethan's text flashed on my phone again. You better be careful. Lila, you have no idea what you are messing with. I picked up the phone. I looked at the threat. Then I looked at the data on the screen. I felt a shift inside me. The fear was still there, but it was changing. It was hardening. I was not just a girl running away from a beatdown anymore. I was a data analyst, and I was looking at the biggest anomaly of my life. They think I am weak, I whispered, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Elaine smiled. It was a grim, wolfish smile. They think you are a victim, she said. Show them you are the auditor. I cracked my knuckles. wincing slightly at the pain in my wrist, and began to type. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in the small guest room, painting my face in cool, digital blue. Outside, the wind rattled the window pane, a reminder of the storm we had just driven through. But inside, the storm was entirely silent. It was scrolling down my screen in rows of Excel spreadsheets and GPS logs. I was no longer Lila the daughter, the victim, or the runaway. I was Lila the senior data analyst for Skytrace Networks, and I was looking at a crime scene. Skytrace was a massive entity, a logistics giant that managed data for thousands of supply chains across the Midwest. Monroe Supply Group, my father's company, was just one of hundreds of clients in our database. I had never looked too closely at his account before because of a professional conflict of interest, and frankly, because I wanted nothing to do with him. But in my spare time, I had built a side project, an algorithmic tool designed to flag inefficiencies in shipping routes. I called it the Watchtower. I had run the Monroe Supply Group data through the Watchtower an hour ago. Just out of curiosity, the results were bleeding red across my screen. Elaine sat beside me, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, a mug of cold tea forgotten in her hand. She was not looking at the data like a layman. She was looking at it like the forensic accountant she used to be before my father and her ex-husband beat the ambition out of her. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing to a cluster of routes in the system labeled Zone 4. "I see it," Elaine said, her voice tight. 7 trucks, scheduled for departure every Tuesday at 2 in the morning. Destination is a warehouse in Chicago. "Exactly," I said, typing a command to bring up the fuel logs. "But look at the fuel consumption. These trucks are logging hundreds of miles. But the weight sensors on the suspension are flatlining. They are driving empty. Aunt Elaine, they are hauling air." "And yet," Elaine murmured, leaning closer to the screen, "look at the billing column." I scrolled to the right. The billing was astronomical. Each of these empty runs was invoicing for premium hazardous material transport, the most expensive tier of shipping we tracked, thousands of dollars per trip, paid out to a subcontractor called North Crescent Holdings. I typed the name North Crescent Holdings into the corporate registry database I had access to through my Skytrace credentials. It was a shell company registered in Delaware. Elaine grabbed a notepad and a pen. "North Crescent," she muttered, writing it down. "That sounds familiar. Lila, pull up the board of directors or the registered agents." I clicked through the layers of corporate obfuscation. It took a few minutes. Whoever set this up was smart. But they were not invisible. They had made the classic mistake of arrogance. They thought nobody would look this deep because Monroe Supply Group was a boring, family-owned construction supplier. "There," I said, my finger shaking as I pointed to the screen. Listed as a junior partner and acquisition liaison for North Crescent Holdings was a name that made my stomach turn over. Ethan Cole. I sat back in my chair, feeling the blood drain from my face. The man who had pushed me into a table, the man who had demanded $20,000 from my savings, was not just a bad fiancé, he was a bagman. Elaine tapped the paper with her pen. "And look who the primary guarantor is," she said softly. I looked. It was Monroe, Mark Patrick Monroe, my father. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a car crash, the constant pressure from Dad to be successful, Ethan's sudden, intense interest in me 2 years ago, right around the time Monroe Supply Group started contracting with Skytrace, the pressure to invest. He was not trying to start a business, I whispered, staring at the screen. He was trying to recruit me. He needed my $20,000 to buy into the laundering scheme. They layer the clean money with the dirty money to make it look legitimate. "And Caroline?" Elaine asked. "Where does she fit?" I typed in the name of the charity Caroline ran. The Monroe Foundation for Youth. I cross-referenced its donor list with North Crescent Holdings. The screen populated with a long list of transactions. North Crescent was the primary donor to Caroline's foundation. "She is the rinse cycle," I said, my voice flat. "They move the dirty money from the ghost trucking routes into North Crescent, then donate it to the foundation to get the tax write-off and scrub it clean. Caroline gets to play the philanthropist. Dad gets to look like a pillar of the community. Ethan gets a cut for managing the flow. Elaine took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. She looked 10 years older than she had that morning, but her eyes were dry. They are not just controlling us. Lila, she said, they are monetizing us. Then she looked at me, a strange expression crossing her face. It was a mixture of grief and sudden, sharp calculation. There is something you do not know, she said. What? I asked. Your grandfather, she began, her voice steady. When he died, he did not leave everything to Mark. He knew what Mark was like. He knew Mark was greedy, so he left 10% of Monroe Supply Group to me. I stared at her. You own 10% of the company? Technically, she said, but Mark made it impossible for me to touch it. When I tried to leave Robert, when I had my breakdown because of the abuse, Mark used it against me. He had me declared incompetent to manage assets. He froze my shares in a trust that he controls. He told the board, and the family, that it was to protect the company image from my instability. She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. He stole my inheritance and called it love, she said. I looked back at the screen, at the red lines of the ghost routes crisscrossing the map of the Midwest. If we can prove this, I said slowly, the gears in my mind turning faster than they ever had before. If we can prove that Mark is using the company for criminal activity, that he is defrauding shareholders, then he breaches his fiduciary duty, Elaine finished, her accountant brain locking into sync with mine. The trust dissolves, he loses control, and I get my 10% back. And Ethan goes to prison, I added. It was not revenge. It was better than revenge. It was an audit. We have to document everything, I said, pulling the laptop closer. If I log into the Skytrace server from here, they might see the IP address eventually, but I can download the raw data packs and save them offline. Do it, Elaine said. I will start outlining the paper trail. I still remember how Mark hides his ledgers. He always uses the same double-entry tricks. For the next 4 hours, we worked in a fever state. I mined the Skytrace database, pulling down gigabytes of GPS logs, fuel receipts, and driver manifests. I took screenshots of every text message Ethan had sent me about the investment, highlighting the dates that matched the phantom shipments. I found emails from my father to Ethan, vague, coded messages about meeting quotas and moving units that made no sense for a construction supply business, but made perfect sense for a money laundering operation. At 6 a.m, as the sun began to bleed gray light through the blinds, I realized we needed legal air cover. We could not just walk into a police station. Mark had friends in the local precinct in Redwood Falls. We needed someone who understood white-collar crime and who hated bullies. I know someone, I said, remembering a business card I had picked up at a Women in Tech seminar a year ago. I searched my digital contacts. Sarah Vance. She was a pit bull of a lawyer based right here in Riverview City, specializing in financial fraud and asset recovery for women going through high-conflict divorces. I typed out an email to her. I did not give details. I just wrote, I have proof of a multi-million-dollar laundering scheme involving Monroe Supply Group and shell companies. I also have evidence of coerced financial abuse. I need a meeting, today. I hit send. Now the safety net. We cannot keep this on my laptop, I said. If Ethan comes looking for me, or if Dad sends someone, they will want this machine. I pulled out the encrypted USB drive I had brought from home. I partitioned a secure sector on the drive, moving all the evidence, the spreadsheets, the screenshots, the logs, into a folder. It needs a password, the system prompted. I looked at Elaine. She was asleep in the chair, her head resting on her hand, looking exhausted but peaceful for the first time in years. I thought about the bruises on her arm from 1995. I thought about the bruises on my ribs from yesterday. I typed in the passphrase. Don't ruin the holiday, 995. I hit enter. The green bar loaded to 100%. The data was locked. I sat back, my body aching, my eyes burning. On the screen, the map of the Midwest was still visible, The red lines of the ghost routes glowed against the black background, looking like cracks in a foundation. For years, my father had used maps to control us. He mapped out our lives. He mapped out where we could go, who we could be, and how far we were allowed to stray from his orbit. He thought this map, this hidden network of illegal routes, was his secret kingdom. He thought it made him smart. He thought it made him untouchable. But he forgot one thing. He forgot that he had raised a daughter who spent her life analyzing patterns in the silence. He forgot that while he was teaching me to be invisible, he was inadvertently teaching me how to see the things that no one else noticed. I touched the screen, tracing one of the red lines with my fingertip. "They think this map helps them hide," I whispered to the empty room. "But a map only works if you are the only one holding the compass." I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the screen. I did not look like the girl who had cried in the kitchen yesterday. I looked like someone who had just found the key to the castle, and I was holding a torch. The map did not just show where the money was going, it showed me the way out, and more importantly, it showed me exactly where to place the dynamite. I closed the laptop. The click was the loudest sound in the world. It sounded like the hammer of a gun being cocked. The office of Sarah Vance was nothing like the chaotic warmth of Aunt Elaine's apartment or the stifling perfection of my parents' house. It was cold, modern, and smelled of lemon furniture polish and high-stakes litigation. Sarah, a woman with razor-sharp cheekbones and eyes that had seen every variety of human deceit, pushed a file folder across the glass desk toward me. "You have enough to get him arrested." "Lila," she said, her voice dry, "but if we go to the police today, with just the spreadsheets and the fuel logs, your father will claim ignorance. He will throw Ethan under the bus. He will say it was a rogue employee and a bad investment. Ethan goes to jail for 5 years. Your father pays a fine, rebrands the company, and keeps his seat at the head of the table." I stared at the file. I did not want a fine. I did not want a scapegoat. I want it all gone. I said, "The company, the reputation, the control he holds over Elaine. I want him to have nothing left to hide behind." "Then we wait," Sarah said, leaning back in her chair. "We do not sprint. We siege. We need to prove that Mark Monroe is not just a victim of bad management, but the architect of the fraud. We need a paper trail that connects his personal signature to the illegal routes, and we need to make sure that when the house of cards falls, he is standing on the ground floor." That meeting set the tempo for the next 12 months of my life. I stopped being a woman who had run away from home. I became a hunter who was willing to sit in the snow for days, waiting for the prey to make a mistake. The first step was the trap, and the bait was greed. I returned to work at Skytrace Networks with a proposal. I pitched it to my boss as a revolutionary pilot program called the Granular Visibility Initiative. The pitch was simple. We would offer our top-tier clients a free upgrade to a new tracking system that logged data not just by the mile, but by the second. Engine idle times, suspension weight variances, driver biometric data. We marketed it as a tool to save money on insurance premiums. But in the back-end code, it was a surveillance suite. It created an immutable blockchain record of every shipment. Once the data was logged, it could not be deleted, edited, or scrubbed by an administrator. I scheduled a video conference with Monroe Supply Group to pitch the pilot. I knew my father would not attend. He thought technology was for secretaries, but I knew who would be there. Ethan's face popped onto my screen. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, but his suit was expensive. When he saw me, he smirked. He clearly thought this was my way of crawling back, using work as an excuse to make contact. "Hello? Lila," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I see you are finally acting like a professional." I kept my face blank. I treated him like a stranger. "This is a standard vendor upgrade. Ethan," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Skytrace is offering Monroe Supply Group a chance to reduce your insurance liability by 15%. The new tracking modules are mandatory for all premium accounts moving forward." Ethan's eyes lit up at the word liability. He was greedy, and he was under pressure to show higher margins to the investors. the real ones and the fake ones. "Does it cost us anything?" he asked. "It is free for the first 2 years." I lied. "But you need to sign the updated service agreement. It authorizes us to install the new hardware in the fleet and retain the data for 10 years for compliance purposes." 10 years. That was the number that would bury them. Ethan did not read the contract. I watched him on the screen. He scrolled to the bottom, clicked the digital signature box, and hit send. He thought he was getting a discount. He thought he was winning. "Done," he said, leaning back. "And Lila? The offer is still open. If you want to come home, if you want to stop playing this little career girl game." I looked at him, the man who had bruised my ribs, and felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no love, just the cold satisfaction of watching a fly land on sticky paper. "The contract is processed," I said. "Have a good day. Mr. Cole." I ended the call. The trap was set. For the next year, I became a ghost in my own family's life. I did not go home for Easter. I did not go home for Thanksgiving. I stayed in Riverview City, living in a small, tidy apartment 2 blocks from Aunt Elaine. I sent cards, though I sent perfectly polite, generic greeting cards for every occasion. Happy birthday. Dad, happy anniversary. Mom, I signed them best. Lila, no love, no warmth, just the bare minimum required to keep them from calling the police to file a missing person report. My father's response was a barrage of emails that swung wildly between aggression and pity. "Lila, your mother cried all day on Easter because you were too selfish to drive 3 hours. I hope your little data job is worth destroying your family. Lila, I heard you are speaking at some conference. Do not think you are special. You are wasting your childbearing years staring at computer screens. You will wake up at 40 alone." I saved every email. I printed them out and added them to the file in Sarah's office. He thought he was shaming me. I knew he was documenting his own pattern of emotional coercion. While I worked the data angle, Aunt Elaine worked the corporate angle. It was a brave and dangerous thing she did. She stopped hiding. She hired a forensic auditor, on Sarah's recommendation, to formally request the financial records of Monroe Supply Group on behalf of a minority shareholder. The letter she sent to the board was a grenade. It demanded an explanation for why the dividend payouts had flatlined despite record shipping volumes. Mark's reaction was immediate and explosive. He did not put it in an email. He showed up at Elaine's apartment door. I was there, hiding in the bedroom, listening. "You are trying to ruin me," Mark shouted, his voice shaking the thin walls. "You ungrateful, crazy woman. I keep your shares in a trust to protect you." "I want the audit, Mark," Elaine said, her voice trembling but firm. "Or I want my seat on the board back." "You will get nothing," he screamed. "I will buy you out. I will write you a check for $50,000 right now, and you will sign over your 10%, or I will declare you mentally incompetent again. I have doctors who owe me favors." Elaine did not back down. "Get out of my house, Mark." He left, slamming the door so hard, a picture frame fell off the wall. But he had made a mistake. Elaine was wearing a wire. We sat at her kitchen table afterward, listening to the recording. The threat was clear. "I will declare you mentally incompetent." It was proof of shareholder oppression. It was proof of extortion. We added the recording to the encrypted drive. While we built the case against them, I began to build something for myself. I realized that if I wanted to take down a giant, I needed to be more than just a disgruntled daughter. I needed to be an authority. I started speaking at logistics conferences. I presented papers on supply chain transparency and fraud detection. I became known in the industry as the woman who could find a needle in a haystack of data. They called me the cartographer. At a conference in Chicago, a young woman came up to me after my presentation. She was shaking. She told me she was working for a trucking company where the numbers were being cooked, and she was afraid to speak up because her boss was her uncle. I looked at her, and I saw myself. I took her for coffee. I showed her how to document the fraud without leaving a digital footprint. And in that coffee shop, the idea for the Christmas Morning Fund was born. I set up a legal entity called the Morning Star Trust. On paper, It was a blind trust to manage my assets and Elaine's potential recovery. But in my mind, it was the foundation for something bigger. I wanted to build a fund that provided financial and digital security for women trapped in family businesses. Women who were told that their silence was the price of their room and board. I funneled every spare dollar I earned into the trust. It was not much, but it was mine. It was clean money. The year dragged on. The seasons changed from the gray slush of winter to the green of spring, the heat of summer, and finally, the crisp decay of autumn. The data from the Skytrace upgrade began to pour in. It was damning. We could see everything. We saw the trucks leaving the depot at 3 a.m. We saw the weight sensors registering zero load. We saw the GPS tracks deviating to unregistered warehouses where cash handoffs likely took place. We saw Ethan signing off on the logs, month after month. By November, we had enough evidence to put them away for 20 years, but Sarah Vance held us back. "Not yet," she said. "The 40-year anniversary is coming up in December." "I know," I said. "Dad has been talking about it for years." "He is planning to announce a massive expansion," Sarah said. "He is going to announce that Monroe Supply Group is going public. He needs the influx of capital to cover the holes in the ledger before the auditors look too closely. If he goes public, he commits securities fraud on a federal level." I realized. "Exactly," Sarah said, tapping her pen on the desk. "Let him walk to the edge of the cliff. Let him invite everyone to watch. And then, when he steps out into thin air, we turn on the lights." The invitation arrived on the 1st of December. It was heavy stock, cream-colored, with gold-embossed lettering. "You are cordially invited to the 40th anniversary gala of Monroe Supply Group, celebrating 4 decades of family, integrity, and service, December 24th, 7 o'clock in the evening, the Grand Ballroom, Riverview City Hotel." There was a handwritten note at the bottom from my mother. "Lila, please come. Your father is ready to forgive you. He wants the whole family on stage for the announcement. Please wear something appropriate. No scenes." I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the invitation. "He is ready to forgive you." The arrogance was breathtaking. He truly believed that he was the benevolent king, graciously allowing the rebellious peasant back into the fold. I called Elaine. "Did you get one?" I asked. "I did." She said, "He wants me there to show the investors that the family is united. He thinks if he puts me in a nice dress and stands me next to him, the rumors about the shareholder dispute will go away." "Are we going?" she asked. I ran my finger over the gold lettering. I thought about the bruise on my ribs. I thought about the red sweater. I thought about the millions of dollars of dirty money moving through the veins of the company my grandfather built. "We are going," I said. I opened my laptop and logged into the Morningstar Trust account. I transferred a significant sum to a visual production company in Riverview City, a company that specialized in high-end event projection and data visualization. I called the owner of the production company, a man I had met at a tech summit. "Dave," I said, "I have a rush job for you. I need you to create a presentation. It needs to look exactly like a corporate celebration video for the first 2 minutes, and then I need it to change." "Change to what?" he asked. "I need it to show a map," I said, "a very specific map, and I need you to hack the projector feed at the Riverview Hotel Ballroom." There was a long silence on the other end. "Lila, that sounds expensive and possibly illegal," he said. "I have the venue contract," I lied smoothly. "I am the daughter of the CEO. I am planning a surprise tribute." "A surprise?" Dave laughed. "I like surprises." I hung up the phone. The trap was not just set, it was baited, polished, and ready to spring. I spent the weeks leading up to Christmas preparing. I bought a dress. It was not the modest, pastel thing my mother would have chosen. It was navy blue, sharp, tailored, and commanded attention. It was the kind of dress a CEO wore to a hostile takeover. On the morning of the 24th, the snow began to fall. It covered the city in a blanket of white, just like it had the year before. But I was not driving away from danger this time. I was driving toward it. I looked at myself in the mirror. There were no bruises to hide this year. My skin was clear. My eyes were steady. I picked up the invitation and slipped it into my purse, right next to the USB drive that contained the end of the Monroe dynasty. My father wanted a perfect holiday. He wanted a show. He wanted to demonstrate to the world that he was a success. I walked out to my car, the cold air filling my lungs. I was going to give him exactly what he asked for. I was not going to ruin the holiday. I was going to illuminate it. The grand ballroom of the Riverview City Hotel was a universe away from the linoleum floor of my parents' kitchen. It was a cavernous space of velvet and crystal, illuminated by chandeliers that dripped light like frozen tears. The air smelled of expensive perfume, prime rib, and the specific, metallic scent of ambition. This was the stage my father had chosen for his coronation. It was the 40th anniversary of Monroe Supply Group, 4 decades of moving concrete, steel, and lumber across the Midwest. 4 decades of building a reputation that was as solid and impenetrable as the materials he sold. Or so he thought. I handed my coat to the checkroom attendant. I was not wearing a red sweater today. I was not wearing an oversized hoodie to hide my body. I was wearing a navy blue silk dress that was tailored to within an inch of its life. It was sharp, architectural, and dark enough to absorb the light. My hair was pulled back. My face was exposed. There was no concealer on my skin because there were no bruises to hide. I looked at myself in the mirror by the coat check. I did not look like the Lila who had fled into the snow a year ago. I looked like a woman who had just signed a contract to demolish a building. I walked into the ballroom. The noise hit me first, a low roar of polite conversation, the clinking of champagne flutes, a string quartet playing a sterilized version of Jingle Bells in the corner. There were 300 people here, investors, suppliers, local politicians, and the extended Monroe clan. I saw them immediately. They were standing near the center of the room, under the largest chandelier, a gravitational center. Mark Monroe looked magnificent. I had to give him that. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost $5,000. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed. He was holding court, one hand in his pocket, the other gesturing expansively as he spoke to the mayor of Riverview City. Beside him stood my mother, Patricia. She was wearing a floor-length gold gown that sparkled aggressively. She looked like a trophy. She was smiling so hard her face looked like it might crack, nodding enthusiastically at whatever the mayor was saying. And then there was the whisper. It started near the entrance as people noticed me. It rippled through the room like a breeze through dry grass. "Is that Lila? I thought she was estranged. She looks different." I walked straight toward them. I did not rush. I moved with the steady, inexorable pace of a freight train. Aunt Beatrice, my father's older sister, stepped into my path. She was holding a glass of sherry and looking at me with wide, confused eyes. "Lila?" she asked, looking me up and down. "My goodness, we did not think you were coming. Your father said you were busy with work in the city." "I am working, Aunt Beatrice," I said, giving her a tight smile. "I am just multitasking tonight." "You look, well," she stammered, "you look very serious, a little dangerous, actually." I did not answer. I kept walking. As I approached the inner circle, my mother spotted me. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a glitch in the programming, before she rebooted it into a mask of maternal delight. "Lila," she cried out, her voice pitching high enough to shatter glass. "You made it." She rushed forward, arms open. She hugged me. It was a performance hug. She barely touched me, terrified of wrinkling her dress or mine, but to the room, it looked like a heartwarming reunion. "I am so glad you decided to be reasonable," she hissed in my ear, her voice dropping to a register only I could hear. "Keep your voice down. Smile. Do not embarrass us." I pulled back and looked at her. "Hello, Mother," I said. "You look expensive." She blinked, unsure if it was a compliment or an insult. Mark turned around then. The conversation with the mayor stopped. He looked at me. For a second, I saw the flash of anger in his eyes, the same anger that had been there the night I left, the night he told me I was dead to him, but then he remembered the audience. "Lila," he boomed, Stepping forward, my prodigal daughter returns. He wrapped me in a bear hug. He smelled of scotch and peppermint. His grip was tight, too tight. It was not an embrace, it was a restraint. He was squeezing my ribs, testing them, reminding me of the pain that used to be there. He leaned in close, his cheek against mine. "Thank you for growing up," he whispered. "I knew you would come to your senses. Do not mention any of that old business tonight. This is my night. Do not ruin it." I did not hug him back. I stood stiff in his arms, waiting for him to release me. I would not dream of ruining it. "Dad," I whispered back, "I am just here to watch the show." He pulled back, clapping me on the shoulder hard enough to sting. "That is my girl," he announced to the group, "a senior analyst at Skytrace Networks now. Very successful, just like her old man." He turned back to the mayor, dismissing me. He had gotten the visual he needed. The dutiful daughter paying homage. He thought the transaction was complete. I stepped back and scanned the room. That was when I saw Caroline. My sister was standing near the buffet table, looking like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and glued back together. She was wearing a red velvet dress that matched the holiday theme perfectly. Beside her was a man I assumed was the new fiancé. He was tall, handsome in a clinical way, with a jawline that could cut glass. He was wearing a tuxedo and checking his watch with an air of impatience. I walked over to them. "Caroline," I said. She jumped, startling so badly she almost dropped her purse. She turned to look at me, and I saw the exhaustion etched deep into the corners of her eyes. The makeup was flawless, but it was thick, hiding shadows that no amount of sleep could cure. "Lila," she breathed. "You came." "This is Julian," she added quickly, gesturing to the man. "Dr. Julian Hayes. He is a neurosurgeon." Julian looked at me with bored disinterest. "Nice to meet you," he said, not offering his hand. "Caroline talks about you, occasionally." He turned back to Caroline, his voice dropping. "Babe, grab me another drink. The service here is terrible." "I can get it." "Julian," Caroline said quickly, her voice too eager to please. "Do you want the scotch or the gin?" "Whatever is faster," he snapped, "and fix your strap. It is slipping. It looks sloppy." I froze. The words were different, but the cadence was identical. It looked sloppy. Do not ruin the image. Caroline fumbled with the strap of her dress, her face flushing pink. As she reached up, her sleeve slipped down. There were no bruises, not yet, but I saw the way her hand trembled. I saw the raw, chewed cuticle of her thumb, a nervous habit she had not had since high school. I stepped closer to her. "Caroline," I said softly, "are you okay?" She looked at me, her eyes darting to Julian, then back to me. "I am fine," she said, her voice bright and brittle. "Just tired. Julian has been working double shifts at the hospital, and I have been trying to plan the wedding. It is just stress. You know how it is." "I know exactly how it is," I said. Julian turned to me, his eyes narrowing. "Is there a problem?" he asked. "No problem," I said, holding his gaze until he looked away. "Just catching up." Caroline scurried off to the bar. I watched her go. A knot of nausea tightening in my stomach. It was a contagion. My father had infected us all. He had taught Caroline that love looked like performance management, and she had gone out and found a manager. "Well, look who crawled out of the data mines." The voice came from behind me. Smooth, smug, familiar. I turned around. Ethan Cole was standing there, holding a champagne flute. He looked prosperous. His suit was sharper than it had been a year ago. He had gained a little weight, the softness of a man who had been eating steak dinners on a company expense account. "Hello." "Ethan," I said. He stepped into my personal space. "I saw the pilot program results," he said, keeping his voice low. "We are saving a fortune on insurance. Your little tracking system is a goldmine. I told Mark we should have brought you in on the tech side years ago." "I am glad you like the data," I said. He smirked. "You know, you look good. Lila, different, less, frumpy. Maybe stepping away did you some good." He reached out and touched my arm. a possessive, casual touch. Mark and I were talking. He said, "He thinks it is time you came back to the fold. Real time. Quit Skytrace. Come work for the family. We are expanding. We are going to need someone to manage the internal networks. Plus," he leaned in, his breath hot on my ear, "I miss you. The apartment is quiet. And honestly, nobody cooks like you." I looked at his hand on my arm. A year ago, I would have flinched. A year ago, I would have felt a spike of fear. Now, I just felt disgust. It was like looking at a dead insect. "Take your hand off me." "Ethan," I said. He laughed. "Feisty. I like it." "I am serious." I said, "Touch me again, and I will break your finger." His smile vanished. He pulled his hand back, his eyes flashing with that familiar spark of violence. "Watch yourself, Lila," he sneered. "You are a guest here. Do not forget who holds the purse strings. Do not forget who built all this." I looked around the room. "I am not forgetting anything," I said. Just then, the double doors at the entrance swung open again. The room went quiet, but not because of me. This was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of confusion. Aunt Elaine walked in. She was not wearing a tuxedo. She was not wearing a gown. She was wearing a simple, elegant black pantsuit. Her gray hair was brushed back, revealing her face. She held her head high. She did not look like the crazy aunt. She looked like a matriarch. She walked straight into the room. A waiter tried to offer her a tray of appetizers. She ignored him. Mark spotted her from across the room. His face went from benevolent host to thundercloud in a split second. He marched toward her, abandoning the mayor. "Elaine," he hissed as he got close, "what are you doing here? I sent you an invitation out of pity. I did not think you would actually have the nerve to show up." Elaine looked at him. She did not shrink. "It is the 40th anniversary. Mark," she said, her voice projecting clearly. "I am a founding partner. Daddy left me 10%. I am here to celebrate our success." She emphasized the word our. Mark grabbed her elbow, trying to steer her toward the exit. "You are making a scene," he muttered. "You smell like that cheap apartment. Go home." Elaine pulled her arm free. "I am not going anywhere," she said. "I am here to meet the investors. I have not been introduced to the board in 15 years. I think it is time I shook some hands." She walked past him, heading straight for a group of men who were wearing pins that identified them as bankers from North Crescent Holdings. Mark stood there, vibrating with rage. He looked around, checking the optics. He could not drag her out screaming, not tonight. He signaled to security, but then he stopped. He saw me. I was standing across the room, watching him. I raised my glass of sparkling water in a mock toast. He glared at me, then smoothed his jacket. He decided to pivot. He forced a smile and turned back to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted, his voice booming without a microphone, "if everyone could please take their seats. We are about to begin the presentation." The lights in the ballroom began to dim. The chatter died down. People shuffled toward the round tables covered in white linens and crystal centerpieces. I did not sit down. I moved toward the side of the room, near the heavy velvet curtains that covered the service entrance. Standing there, in the shadows, were two people who did not belong on the guest list. One was Sarah Vance, my lawyer. She was wearing a black evening gown that looked severe and professional. She was holding a clutch purse that was too heavy to be just a purse. It contained a subpoena. The other was a man named Agent Miller. He was with the State Bureau of Investigation, Economic Crimes Division. He was posing as Sarah's date, but his eyes were scanning the exits, not the buffet. I sidled up next to them. "Is everyone in position?" I whispered. Agent Miller nodded. "We have 2 uniforms in the lobby. My team is in the van outside. We just need the signal." Sarah looked at me. "Are you ready for this, Lila?" she asked. "Once this starts, there is no going back. You are burning the house down." I looked at the stage. My father was walking up the steps to the podium. A spotlight hit him, turning his silver hair into a halo. He looked like a god. Behind him, A massive screen displayed the logo of Monroe Supply Group in gold letters. I looked at Ethan, who was sitting in the front row, looking smug. I looked at Caroline, who was staring at her lap, picking at her cuticles. I looked at my mother, who was gazing at Mark with adoring, empty eyes. I touched the phone in my pocket. I had the remote access app open. The production team was on standby. I did not bring the matches. "Sarah," I said, watching my father grip the podium, "I just brought the light." Mark tapped the microphone. The sound echoed through the hall. "Welcome, everyone," he said, his voice rich with emotion. 40 years. It feels like yesterday that I started this company with nothing but a single truck and a dream. A dream to build something for my family. To build a legacy. He paused for applause. The room clapped obediently. "I have sacrificed everything for this company," Mark continued, his voice catching theatrically. "I have worked nights. I have missed birthdays. I have done it all so that my children, and my children's children, would never have to worry." I pulled my phone out. My thumb hovered over the execute button. "Tonight," he said, beaming, "we are not just looking back, we are looking forward. I am proud to announce the next chapter of Monroe Supply Group." The room held its breath. I pressed the button. The connection to the projector cycled. On the stage, Mark smiled, waiting for his prepared video of happy drivers and sunsets to play. I watched him. I watched the confidence on his face. It was the last time I would ever see it. The lights dimmed further. The screen flickered. And the show began. The room went dark, save for the massive LED screen descending from the ceiling behind the podium. A hush fell over the 300 guests, the kind of respectful silence money buys when it expects to be entertained. The video began. It was a masterpiece of revisionist history. Soft, swelling piano music filled the ballroom. Sepia-toned photographs faded in and out. There was my father, Mark Monroe, 30 years old and handsome, standing next to a single flatbed truck. There was my mother, young and smiling, holding a baby, Caroline, wrapped in a white blanket. I was not in the photos. I was the editor's cut, left on the floor to improve the pacing. My father's voice boomed over the speakers, recorded in a professional studio, rich with gravitas. "I started this company with 2 hands and a promise." The voiceover said, "A promise to bring integrity to every mile, to build a foundation not just of concrete, but of trust." On stage, the real Mark Monroe stood with his head bowed humbly, bathing in the glow of his own mythology. The audience watched, captivated. The video shifted to drone shots of the current fleet, shiny white trucks rolling down scenic highways, drivers waving, the sun setting perfectly behind a Monroe Supply warehouse. "For 40 years, we have been more than a business," the voiceover continued. "We have been a family." I stood in the shadows by the velvet curtain, my phone in my hand. I looked at the time. It was 7:20. "Now," I whispered. I tapped the screen of my phone. The change was instant and violent. The swelling piano music cut out with a sharp digital screech that made half the room jump. The beautiful drone footage of the sunset vanished. In its place, the screen went black. A second later, a stark, high-contrast interface appeared. It was the Skytrace Network's dashboard. It was not pretty. It was not sentimental. It was raw data. A map of the Midwest appeared, detailed down to the county lines. Hundreds of green lines represented legitimate shipping routes, but pulsing over them, like arterial bleeds, were thick, jagged red lines. The audience murmured. A few people laughed nervously, thinking it was an avant-garde artistic choice. Mark turned around to look at the screen. His smile froze. He blinked, confused. He looked toward the tech booth at the back of the room and made a cut-it motion with his hand. But the video did not cut. Instead, text began to scroll across the map. Fast, relentless. Vehicle ID, MSG 409. Cargo weight, 0. Fuel surcharge, $4,000. Destination, unregistered. Mark's face went from confusion to panic. He tapped the microphone. I apologize. Everyone, he said, his voice tight. We seem to be having a technical difficulty. If the booth could please kill the feed? The feed did not die. The map zoomed in. It focused on a specific cluster of red lines converging on a warehouse district in Chicago. A sidebar popped up, listing transaction dates. December 24th, 2 years ago. December 24th, 1 year ago. December 24th, today. The tech crew in the booth were frantically hitting buttons, but nothing worked. I had paid the production company a significant bonus to ensure that once the sequence started, the only way to stop it was to pull the power cord from the wall, and I knew the breaker box was locked. Mark was shouting now. "Turn it off! Someone turn it off!" The room was buzzing. The polite silence was gone, replaced by the sharp electric hum of scandal. I stepped out from the curtains. I did not run. I walked. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage. My heels did not make a sound on the carpeted platform. Mark was so busy yelling at the darkness that he did not see me until I was standing right next to him. "It is not a glitch, Dad," I said. My voice was not amplified, but he heard me. He spun around, his eyes wide and wild. "Lila," he hissed, "what did you do? Fix this. You work with computers. Fix this now." I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He was so stunned that he let go. I turned to face the crowd. The spotlight hit me, blindingly bright. I could not see their faces, but I could feel their attention. It was heavy and terrified. "Good evening," I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. It sounded like the voice of the cartographer. "My name is Lila Monroe. Most of you know me as Mark's daughter. Some of you know me as the one who does not come home for Christmas." I gestured to the massive screen behind me, where the red lines were still pulsing. "But professionally, I am the senior data lead for Skytrace Networks. For the last 2 years, I have been the person responsible for tracking every single mile driven by the Monroe supply fleet." Mark took a step toward me, reaching for the mic. "Lila, stop this," he growled. "You are drunk. You are ruining the night." I stepped out of his reach. "I am not drunk. Dad," I said into the mic, "I am auditing." The word auditing echoed through the ballroom. It is a word that strikes fear into the heart of every wealthy person in a tuxedo. I pointed to the map. "What you are seeing behind me are not delivery routes," I explained, breaking it down simply, the way I did for juries or board members. "These red lines represent phantom shipments, trucks that leave the depot empty, drive 300 miles to burn fuel and generate an invoice, and then return." I clicked a button on a small presentation clicker I had palmed from the podium. The screen changed. It showed a web of financial transactions. "These empty trucks bill for hazardous material transport." I continued. "The invoices are paid by a shell company called North Crescent Holdings." A gasp went through the room. I heard a chair scrape against the floor. Someone was leaving. "North Crescent Holdings is a company with no employees, no office, and no product," I said, "but it does have a board of directors." The screen flashed a document. It was a corporate registration form. The names were highlighted in yellow. Director: Ethan Cole, Guarantor, Mark Patrick Monroe. Beneficiary: the Monroe Foundation for Youth. I looked down at the front row. Caroline was standing up. She was staring at the screen, her hand covering her mouth. Her face was the color of chalk. She looked at the logo of her charity, the charity she had built her entire identity around, and then she looked at the red lines of the money laundering map. I could see the moment it hit her, the realization that every gala, every ribbon cutting, every scholarship she had handed out was just a way to clean dirty money. She was not a philanthropist. She was a prop. Mark lunged for me. "That is enough," he screamed. "Security, get her off the stage." But before security could move, Ethan Cole vaulted onto the platform. He did not look smug anymore. He looked feral. His tie was crooked. He was sweating. "Give me that," he shouted, grabbing for the microphone. He wrestled it from my hand. The feedback squealed, a high-pitched shriek that made everyone cover their ears. "This is a violation of privacy," Ethan yelled into the mic, his voice cracking. "This data is proprietary. She stole it. Skytrace has no right to show this. This is corporate espionage." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You are going to jail. Lila, you signed a non-disclosure agreement. You cannot use client data like this." I stood there, empty-handed, and smiled. "Actually, Ethan," I said, my voice loud enough to be heard in the front row, "you gave us permission." Sarah Vance stepped out from the wings. She walked onto the stage like an executioner in a ball gown. She was holding a document. She walked straight up to Ethan, took the microphone from his trembling hand, and held up the paper. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room, "this is the Granular Visibility Service Agreement you signed 11 months ago." She flipped to the 4th page. Paragraph 3, subsection B. She read, "The client grants Skytrace Networks full, irrevocable rights to retain, audit, and publish anonymized or specific route data for the purposes of compliance verification and fraud detection." She lowered the paper and looked him in the eye. "You authorized the audit. Ethan, you signed it because you thought it would save you 15% on insurance." Ethan stared at the paper. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at Mark. Mark looked at Ethan with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You idiot," Mark whispered. "You stupid, greedy idiot." The room was in chaos now. People were standing up. Waiters were frozen with trays of champagne. The mayor was already near the exit, talking frantically into his phone. Then, the final piece of the trap snapped shut. Agent Miller walked onto the stage. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a windbreaker that said State Bureau of Investigation on the back. He was followed by 2 uniformed officers. "Mark Monroe, Ethan Cole," Miller said, his voice calm and authoritative. "I am Agent Miller with the Economic Crimes Division. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering." Mark staggered back. He looked at the agent, then at the audience. He needed a way out. He needed a narrative. "I did not know," Mark shouted, throwing his hands up in a gesture of surrender. He pointed at Ethan. "It was him. It was Cole. He managed the logistics. I am just the owner. I had no idea he was running these trucks. He betrayed me." Ethan's head snapped toward Mark. "You lying son of a bitch," Ethan screamed. "It was your idea. You set up the accounts." "I did not know anything," Mark insisted, playing to the crowd, playing to the cameras that were undoubtedly recording on 100 smartphones. "I am a victim here. I am a family man." "Liar." The word cut through the shouting. Aunt Elaine walked up the stairs. She moved slowly, leaning on the railing, but she did not stop until she was center stage. She stood between Mark and the audience. She reached into her small black purse and pulled out a stack of papers. They were old emails, printed out, highlighted. She handed them to Agent Miller, but she spoke to Mark. "These are the board minutes from 5 years ago. Mark," she said, "the ones where I asked why the fuel costs were so high on the Chicago routes." Mark went pale. "Elaine, don't," he whispered. "We are family." "And this," she continued, holding up another sheet, "is the email you sent me the next day. The one where you told me that if I asked about the Chicago routes again, you would have my trust fund dissolved and put me in a state facility." She turned to the crowd. "He knew," she said. "He has known for 10 years. He silenced me to protect the money. He silenced his daughter to protect the money." She looked at me. Her eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling. "But he forgot that silence does not erase the data." Agent Miller nodded to his officers. "Please place your hands behind your back," he said to Mark. The officers moved in. I watched as my father, the man who had ruled our lives with a terrifying absolute authority, was turned around and handcuffed. The metal clicked. It was the sound of a spell breaking. Ethan was trying to run. He jumped off the side of the stage, but 2 more officers were waiting for him by the buffet table. They tackled him into a pyramid of shrimp cocktails. The crash of glass and ice was the punctuation mark on his career. The ballroom was emptying out. The rats were fleeing the ship. I stood on the stage, alone in the center. To my left, my father was being led away, shouting about lawyers and mistakes. To my right, Ethan was being dragged out in handcuffs, cursing my name. In the front row, my mother was sitting on the floor, weeping into her gold dress, her perfect image shattered into a million pieces. And behind me, the screen was still glowing. The red lines of the ghost routes burned bright against the black map. They looked like scars. They looked like cracks in the earth. I turned and looked at the map one last time. For years, I had been afraid of this map. I had been afraid of the secrets it held. But now, looking at it, I realized it was beautiful. It was the truth. And the truth was the only thing that could burn a lie this big to the ground. Mark looked back at me one last time before they pushed him through the double doors. His eyes met mine. There was no anger left in them, just shock. He looked at me like he had never seen me before. And he hadn't. He had seen a daughter. He had seen a victim. He had seen a prop. He had never seen the cartographer. I looked at the empty ballroom, at the debris of the party, at the red map glowing like a fire. "Merry Christmas, Dad," I whispered. I dropped the clicker on the stage. It made a hollow thud. The legal battle was over. The investigation had begun. But as I looked down at Caroline, who was still standing there, staring at me with hollow, terrified eyes, I knew the real work was just starting. We had burned the house down. Now we had to see if we could survive the cold. The silence that followed the chaos was not the heavy, suffocating silence of the Monroe household. It was the ringing, empty silence of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped firing. The grand ballroom of the Riverview City Hotel, which just an hour ago had been a fortress of wealth and pretension, was now a crime scene. The flashing blue and red lights of the police cruisers outside pulsed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, washing the room in a strobe of emergency colors. The guests had fled like rats from a sinking ship, leaving behind half-eaten shrimp cocktails and overturned chairs. The only people left were the staff, who were busy whispering in corners, the remaining police officers bagging evidence, and the remnants of my family. My mother, Patricia, had collapsed onto one of the gold Chiavari chairs near the stage. She looked small. The aggressive sparkle of her gold gown now just looked gaudy, like tinsel on a tree that had been thrown out in January. She was not crying anymore. She was staring at the space where my father had stood before they led him away in handcuffs. I walked over to her. My heels clicked on the parquet floor, the sound echoing in the emptiness. She looked up at me. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. There was no maternal warmth in her gaze. There was fear, yes, but underneath it was a deep, burning resentment. "You ruined it," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You ruined everything. Are you happy now? Lila? Your father is in a police car. The neighbors saw him in cuffs. The business is gone." I stood there, looking down at the woman who had spent 30 years polishing a lie until it shone like a diamond. "I did not ruin anything. Mother," I said, my voice calm. I sat down in the chair opposite her, bringing myself to her eye level. I did not want to loom over her. I wanted her to see me. "I did not break the family," I said gently. "I just turned on the lights. The house was already burning. Mom, you just refused to smell the smoke because you like the warmth." She shook her head, clutching her pearl necklace as if it were a rosary. "It cannot be true," she stammered. "The money, the trucks. Mark said he was investing. He said he was building a legacy for you girls." "He was building a cage," I said, "and he was paying for it with dirty money." I looked over at the buffet table. Caroline was sitting on the edge of the riser. Her red velvet dress pooled around her. She was holding a glass of water that a sympathetic waiter had given her. Her fiancé, the neurosurgeon, was gone. He had vanished the moment the word indictment was mentioned, proving that his love was exactly as deep as his patience for scandal. Caroline looked up and met my eyes. For the first time in her life, The golden child looked tarnished. "I knew," she whispered. The confession hung in the air. Mom gasped. "Caroline, do not say that." I knew something was wrong. Caroline continued, her voice gaining strength. She looked at me, tears spilling over. I saw the emails. Lila. Sometimes Dad would ask me to sign things for the foundation. Blank checks, transfer forms. I asked him once why the amounts were so weird. Why we were getting donations from companies I had never heard of. "And what did he say?" I asked. "He told me I was pretty," Caroline said, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "He told me I was the face of the family and he was the brains. He told me not to worry my pretty little head about the math. He told me—" She choked on a sob. "He told me not to ruin the good thing we had going." She covered her face with her hands. I was so scared, Lila. I was scared that if I asked too many questions, he would stop loving me. I was scared he would look at me the way he used to look at you, like I was a mistake. I reached out and touched her knee. "He did not love you, Caroline," I said softly. "He employed you. There is a difference." Caroline looked at me, her eyes wide with a realization that was shattering her world. She had been the favorite, yes, but she had also been a prisoner. Her cell was just decorated better than mine. Aunt Elaine walked over to us. She had finished giving her statement to Agent Miller. She looked tired, but she stood tall. She looked like a general surveying the aftermath of a necessary war. She looked at the three of us, the wreckage of the Monroe women. "It is over," Elaine said. "The board is dissolving. The assets are frozen." Mom let out a wail. "We are destitute. We have nothing." "We have the truth," Elaine said sharply, "and we have the company, or what is left of it." She pulled a chair over and sat down. "I spoke to the federal prosecutors," she said, "because I am a whistleblower and a minority shareholder who was defrauded. I have standing to petition for control of the remaining assets. I am going to petition the court to appoint me as the temporary CEO during the restructuring." She looked at Mom. "I am not going to let Mark destroy the livelihood of 200 drivers and warehouse workers just because he was a criminal." Elaine said, "We are going to clean it up. We are going to stop the ghost routes. We are going to pay the drivers a fair wage. We are going to make Monroe Supply Group a boring, honest logistics company." She paused, looking at me. "And I am going to need a good data analyst to help me find where the rest of the bodies are buried." I smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "I think I can squeeze you in," I said. But there was one more thing. The final twist of the knife that was actually a bandage. I reached into my purse and pulled out a checkbook. It was not my personal account. It was the account for the Morning Star Trust. "There is something else," I said. Mom and Caroline looked at me. "For the last year, I have been taking every penny of profit I made from my side projects and my bonuses." I said, "I put it all into a trust." I looked at the red map still glowing faintly on the screen behind us. "I call it the Christmas Morning Fund." I said, "What is it?" Caroline asked, wiping her eyes. "It is a rapid response fund for women," I explained, "specifically for women who are trying to leave abusive homes during the holidays, when the shelters are full, when the banks are closed, when their families are telling them to just smile and bear it for the sake of the season." I looked at my mother. "It pays for hotel rooms. It pays for gas. It pays for lawyers. It pays for the silence to be broken." Mom looked down at her hands. "Why?" she whispered. "Because 29 years ago, nobody came for me," I said, "and 30 years ago, nobody came for Elaine. I am making sure that never happens again." I stood up. My ribs did not hurt. My heart did not race. I felt light. "I am going home," I said, "my real home." "Where are you going?" Caroline asked. Her voice was small, terrified of being left behind with our mother and the ruins of their reputation. "Riverview City," I said. "You have my number. Caroline, if you ever decide you want to stop posing and start living, call me." I walked out of the ballroom, past the police tape, past the whispering staff, and out into the cold, clean air of the night. 1 year later. The smell of cinnamon and pine was the same. but the air felt different. It was lighter, warmer. I stood in the kitchen of the Victorian house in Riverview City that Elaine and I had bought 6 months ago. It was not a mansion. The floors creaked, and the draft from the window was a little aggressive, but it was ours. The kitchen was chaotic. There was flour on the counter, music playing, loud, messy pop music, not the polite jazz my father used to insist on, and laughter. Elaine was at the stove, teaching a young woman named Sarah how to make gravy. Sarah had come to us 3 days ago, bruises on her arms and a toddler on her hip, fleeing a husband who threw plates when the football game did not go his way. The Christmas Morning Fund had paid for her legal counsel and put a roof over her head. 2 other women sat at the breakfast table, drinking coffee and laughing as they strung popcorn for the tree. They were part of our network now, the chosen family. I opened the oven door to check on the roast. I caught my reflection in the glass. I stopped. The woman looking back at me was not the girl in the red sweater. Her hair was loose, her eyes were bright. She was wearing an apron that said, "The chef is always right." There were no bruises, not on my skin, and the ones on my soul were fading, turning into scars that just reminded me of where I had been. I closed the oven door. The doorbell rang. It was not a heavy, demanding pound. It was a hesitant, shy ring. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the door. I opened it. Caroline stood on the porch. She looked different. Her hair was cut short, a bob that framed her face. She was wearing jeans and a puffy winter coat that looked like she had bought it at a department store, not a boutique. She was not wearing makeup. She was holding a small overnight bag. Just one. "Hi," she said, her breath clouding in the cold air. "Hi," I said. I left him." She said, "Julian. He told me I was embarrassing him because of the trial. He told me I needed to be quieter." She looked down at her boots. "I drove here. I did not know where else to go. Mom is still waiting for Dad to come home. She thinks he is going to win the appeal. I could not stay there. Lila." It felt like I was suffocating. She looked up at me, fear in her eyes, the same fear I had felt standing in my father's hallway. "Is it okay?" she asked, "that I came?" I did not bring any gifts. I did not bring anything. I looked at my sister, the girl who had once mocked my bruises because she was too afraid to acknowledge the violence that caused them. I saw the shame in her posture. I stepped back and opened the door wide. "Come in, Caroline," I said. She hesitated on the threshold. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I am a mess. I have been crying for 3 hours. I look terrible." I laughed. It was a real deep laugh. "In this house," I said, looking her in the eye, "nobody cares how you look. We only care how you are." I reached out and took her hand. It was cold, but it squeezed mine back. "And Caroline?" I said, "Here. Nobody is required to hide their bruises. Not the ones on your arm, and not the ones in your heart." She sobbed, a sound of pure relief, and stepped inside. I closed the door against the cold. Back in the kitchen, the laughter started up again. I poured Caroline a mug of hot cider. I watched her sit down next to Sarah. I watched Elaine put a hand on her shoulder. I watched the circle expand to let her in. I walked over to the window and looked out at the snow. The street was quiet. The map of my life had changed. I thought about the red lines on the screen, the ghost routes, the lies. My father had drawn a map for us that led only to his own ego. He had built roads that went nowhere. But I was the cartographer now. I looked at the women in my kitchen. Survivors, fighters, architects of their own lives. I whispered to the reflection in the window, to the Lila of 2 years ago, who was driving alone in the dark. On Christmas morning that year, I was told not to ruin the holiday. I was told that my pain was an inconvenience. But on this Christmas morning, I chose to ruin the mold that kept us silent. If they leave you on the cold road, keep walking. If they tell you the map is fixed, draw a new one. Someday, the people who told you to stay small will have to stand on the sidewalk and watch you drive by, not as the daughter who accepted her place, but as the woman who built a new road for herself and for everyone coming up behind her. I turned back to the room, to the warmth, to the noise. "Merry Christmas," I said to my family. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below with your city or country so we can see how far this map stretches. If you enjoyed Lila's journey, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe, and remember, you are the author of your own map.